to the SMITE Pro League. It's been a little while, but we are going to hop right back into the groove here with some great sets to start things off. Obviously, Finch here. I'm joined by Aggro. Great job on the waiting room there, Aggro, getting everyone caught up on all of those changes because, boy, were there a lot of them. We're not going to get a chance to see those right out of the box, but we are going to get our first look here at Radiance. They have been a while since they played their first set. We're going to get to see them up against Obey in just a little bit.
Can't wait, man. I don't think I've looked forward to an SPL week this much since week number one. It really does have so many different storylines. Radiance coming back. They haven't played in a few weeks. How rusty are they going to be up against Obey Alliance, the new look of United? As you mentioned, we got a 1 versus 2 matchup tomorrow in Ghost versus Space Station. I feel like every single day there's a headline or multiple headlines that I can't wait to see play out. I think it's going to be one of the best weeks of SPL we've had so far in Season 8.
And I'm glad for these changes because some of these matchups I think would have otherwise been considered lopsided ones, maybe ones you could take a little bit for granted, but I don't think that's going to be the case here at all. SSG obviously still up at the very top, 10-1. Just ludicrously impressive, the tear that they have been on. But I think people kind of forgot with Radiance taking that break just how much of a hot streak they were on too for a while, especially when Ghost started stumbling. We thought the new top 2 was SSG Radiance, and maybe there was a little bit of separation there here with Ghost. I think Radiance with a chance to prove it here up against an Obey team that has also been looking better here in this set. A lot of what Obey has been doing well has been between Sino and Wolfie. Give Sino, Erlong, Shen, and Wolfie something that can hit people that are rooted or taunted or whatever, and that's going to be a good combo.
Exactly. This Obey team has really turned up as of late, but I think Radiance is going to be the team that comes in a little bit more prepared because this Radiance team just has so many different looks. They're willing to play different hunters mid. It's not always this Cupid that you're seeing on your screen right now, but the Neath as well for big man Tings has been quite impressive for him. He can play the Agni, he can play things like the Ra, and adapting has really started to elevate his game back up to that next level. Aurora has been a pinnacle of consistency in the support role during phase number 2. This team is just making it work, man. They're just playing really, really well, and I've been very impressed with them. I agree that they should be considered one of the top 2 teams in the SPL right now. They have that just explosive nature come the team fighting phase that it feels like if you don't beat them insanely hard really early, you're going to have a tough time winning because their late game team fighting is just phenomenal.
And despite all of those accolades, the team across from them in Obey, I don't think they're going to be nervous about this one at all. This is a team that is not lacking for confidence, right? When you've got Sino in your jungle for you, you're going to be thinking that you're always in these sets. And I think that he's got a good reason to think so. I talked earlier about the combo that has been working for them out of that mid-jungle, but that's not the only place where they've seen some improvement. I think Inbound is perhaps their most improved player throughout these last few weeks. I was very hard on him early on in the year about what a detriment he was, but now he's moved on to become an active member of the success that they've had recently.
Definitely. He has grown in this support role very, very considerably, has become a real contributor to them. The whole Obey team has really grown effectively. Yep. Sino, in his influence, I think is incredibly apparent when you watch what this team has become and what they want to do in every single game. Now, the only concern for Obey is that they have been incredibly one-dimensional. If they don't get these setup picks for Sino, the long-range damage snipes from specifically Ra only, it feels like, for Wolfie, and Cupid for Wowie, they feel like they aren't going to operate at peak capacity. So what are they going to do when other teams start to pick and ban around it, which should have already been happening? These picks and bans in particular should be very telling. I'm wondering what Radiance is going to do because I don't think there's any world where you should be giving Obey their ideal comp unless you feel like you've got a really, really strong few counter picks that could then absolutely wipe the floor with them.
I'm right there alongside you, Aggro. I think that one-dimensionality, we'll see if that's really what it is or if they've maybe got some other things that can make it work. Let's get to the picks and bans for game number 1 of set number 1. The SPL is back. How can you not be excited? Radiance will be in that first pick position here. And about this combo for Obey, I mean, I don't know if you can really find it within yourself to ban away the Ra, but I think the Erlong Shen is one that has risen up enough lately, even outside of Sino's hands, that you could probably find a way to ban that one away. I'm interested to see if that's the route they'll go or if they'll keep these bans fairly standard.
I think so, man. I mean, the Ra has been really, really impressive, but Erlong feels like a more priority pick for multiple teams. I think you could really get away with banning either one. This is what I was looking forward to. What are we going to see for Tsukiyomi?
Exactly.
Instantly banned first overall by Obey. A little surprised. I feel like with a new character like Tsukiyomi, you actually have some power in second pick. If you just hold that ban for the very end, because then Radiance starts questioning, do they think it's good? You know, if Radiance doesn't think Tsukiyomi's that good, then maybe they feel like they can leave it open, you know, or they have to ban it if they think Obey might really highly value it. Small mistake, but I think it is a slight mistake by Obey to ban that right away. If you're going to ban it last. At least let Radiance kind of stew in it for a little bit.
Yeah, maybe make Radiance sweat. Make them think about maybe they gotta waste a ban on it. By the way, I don't think it's necessarily a waste. Tsukiyomi, despite some of those nerfs that came in for him, still certainly strong with the ultimate, the disarm, the stun, the slow. He's got some options and quite a bit of damage to try and make life hard on you. So Obey do not want to deal with it. Meanwhile, Radiance keep things fairly standard, I'd say. Kuzenbo has been one of Inbound's go-to picks. Ama, I think the best solo laner out there right now. Persephone, the best mid laner out there right now. So ban those all away, but they did not take an eye towards that combo we mentioned. So Obey could very easily be trying to grab an Erlang Shen throughout these top 3 picks.
Olaron's still open, Cthulhu's still open, and this is a good idea by Obey because they're leaving all their picks open. They leave open Olaron, but Olaron has a pretty back and forth matchup with Erlang Shen. There's a lot of positives for Olaron in that moment, that there's no CC immunity for Erlang. His 72 transformation is not knock-up immune, so you can use your 3 to knock him out of that turtle form or his mink form. But at the same time, then long-range pin really hurts Olaron. There's no CC immunity for him either. So it's kind of a snowball matchup either way. I'd be surprised if Obey don't take Erlang here, just to make sure that Sino gets a priority pick. But maybe because of that Olaron matchup, they want to go a different direction.
Interesting. It'll be the Rom and the Sobek looked at. Now, I think recently we've seen a lot of Cupid coming through. Cyclone has played it, and we've also seen Obey play it in a couple of spots too. But they do like to go for this Rom, and I do think that makes sense. Rom, the best physical hunter out there in a world where Freya and Olaron already are banned and or picked, so no reason not to take this guy. Astro Arrow gives him so much pressure right at the beginning of the game, and we've seen this new Silver Branch build really work on Rom in particular, with the ability to activate that steroid, get a power buff out of it instead of the attack speed buff, and then go up into the ultimate. So lots of options with the ROM there. But I don't think anyone is surprised to see Aurora taking Hercules if that's left open.
Yeah, Olaron Hercules are the first 2 picks for Radiance, and Cyclone Spin's one of the best Olaron players in the whole world, and Aurora is one of the best Hercules players in the whole world. And Obey should be very scared right now, because this core 3v3 already that Radiance has drafted is just phenomenal. Neath there for Big Man. He has made this character look top tier. The way he's utilized those World Weavers as initiators in team fights. Radiance just get deep wards. Big Man stands around in that World Weaver, waits until a carry walks over a ward, and then pulls the trigger, and Radiance has been fantastic at capitalizing off of those initiations. I think this is going to be very, very difficult already for Obey as a Thor pick comes through. I wonder if this is flex for Sino and for Ducky. I think we have seen Ducky play this pick. We've seen a lot of solo laners take it. Solo Retrol notably. Variety's played it as well. Feel like this might be a flex pick. Maybe they just want to get something that can really get on top of this Olaron a little bit more easily than something like that Erlang Shen.
Maybe so. I mean, this is certainly a strong jungler, right? I know Myth and I have been constantly saying, why don't we see more Thor? But just for some reason doesn't feel like Sino to me. He's really liked these warriors in the jungle, and really in particularly liked the Erlang. He certainly could end up playing this, but I think I'm right alongside you in terms of its flex potential. So Obey, maybe kind of keeping things a little bit shrouded in mystery with these top 3 picks. They ban away the Xing Chen and the Cthulhu. I assume they're thinking of those as solo bans here at this point, and particularly the Cthulhu, with that Hercules already locked in. Radiance ban away the Ra. That is what Wolfie has looked best on late. I think it's really smart in the second round of bans to take that one away. And look at this Nike. I wonder if they're also not 100% sold on where this Thor's going to go, because we know Sino would play this, even with Sunder out there as a good counter.
Agreed, and it's a matchup that Olaron doesn't want to have to deal with. It's good against double auto attackers, because don't forget that formation shield blocks auto attacks, which is super annoying to deal with. I think that's a strong ban there by Radiance. Not in love with this Raijin pick on the other side. Raijin just feels like he's taken a lot of nerfs. I don't think the itemization really goes his way. He really was excellent with double flat pen being in the meta, because he could really utilize that early game advantage to one-shot tanks. Between that and the multitude of nerfs to the kit, Raijin is okay. He's an okay mid laner. I don't think he's good enough to warrant picking in the SPL. I would have liked to see Wolfie go a different direction.
Yeah, if Raijin wants flat pen, we've seen a lot of mid builds avoid flat pen in the top 3 items altogether, haven't we? With like the soul gem starts that have kind of been cropping up a little bit more. It's Robin and Wukong that come in for Radiance. Robin has been a go-to for adapting lately. He loves the ability to get involved early with this pick, and it does have great chase down potential, even on someone like Raijin with that Thunder Crash to get away. And the Wukong has risen. I know somewhere Mifflin cracking his knuckles. Can't wait to talk about how good this guy is over there in the soul lane. He's right. Wukong has suddenly risen up as kind of a dominant force over there.
Okay, now this is what I'm talking about.
Whoa.
For Sino. He loves this god. He loves Arachne. And this is what I want to see Obey doing, throwing different looks at teams. When was the last time Radiance played against Arachne? Probably early Season 8 when people weren't sure. Maybe after the Golden Blade changes, they played against some Arachnes and scrims. But I like this. It is a brutal matchup for Neith. It is a brutal matchup for Olorun. Their mobility just is not good enough to get away from her. If she can web you, even through the backflip, you'll be leaving that web trail behind. It's very easy to chase them down. It's all got to be on Sino's shoulders, though. This Arachne has to make plays in that early to mid game. She's not this instant loss if you get to 25 minutes with Arachne. She outtrades literally everybody on the map at all times, as long as she buys Toxic Blade against the Olorun, I imagine. I kind of like the pick. It gives you some 1v1 potential. It's interesting, man. I don't know. Radiant's got a phenomenal draft, like top to bottom, top tier in their role. Fantastic. I kind of like what Obey has anyways.
Yeah, it might sound like a lot of hubbub to make about one little spider, but I don't know. I think this Arachne could certainly be interesting. Radiance and Obey, game number 1. Let's get it down to Dolson and Myth.
That is right, Finch and Aggro. The SPL finally back here, and Radiance Obey is going to be what kicks us off. It is Dolson and Mifflin on the call. Doug working the camera for us to bring us right back in. Mifflin, let's start off with the Spider. My ranked teammates are convinced it is the best jungler out there nowadays. Where do you land on Sino playing the Arachne out of the jungle? Does it make some sense to you? What are your realistic expectations here?
I think Arachne's a very volatile pick in of itself. You really want to get involved in the early game. Arachne really works well with a lead. But once you get to that team fight phase, if you're playing against a team that won't give you those 1v1s that Agar already pointed out are so strong, she's going to struggle immensely getting into these 5-on-5 engagements. Any form of CC is going to stop a lot of what she's doing.
Look at this, a small clash around the blue buff here, and Sino walks in, Cyclone Spin at the 000 mark is going to pick up first blood. That's not a hidden gank. There's nothing secret there, I don't think. Obey just walk into it, and Sino falls down.
Okay, we can't say Obey walked into it. Sino straight up walked into it.
Fair.
He just saw people inside the blue buff, said, okay, well, if they're going to walk into my webs, maybe I'll use that to help out with the auto attacks, and he just didn't really realize that there was about 2 members hidden behind that wall. It's tough, man. That's a real tough start for the Arachne. That itemization that we really need her to get online early is going to be slowed down off of that. First Blood going the way of Radiance in their first game back. That's going to be a nice start for them. I would just like to see a little bit more caution out of them. We saw already Radiance was grouped up as 5. Obey didn't have the numbers to take that fight.
And it's Cyclone Spin that picks up the first blood on the Olorun. Olorun and Freya have consistently been banned out. Freya has sort of been the one magical ADC that has drawn the pick more often than Olorun. Maybe Olorun banned out a little bit more often. You like Olorun, I imagine, still out of this long lane, and now it's that much more difficult with first blood in hand.
Yeah, Olorun with First Blood should never happen. I say it about every single Magic ADC. If they're not 3 levels down, 4 levels down, 15, 16 minutes into the game, you haven't done your job as an opposing team to shut them down. Because Hunters scale so much better into the early game. The second they get those boots online or their stacking item ready, they should be able to win out on those engagements, very easily freeze out the lane. And the main failing of the majority of magical ADCs is that they have no mobility, so they don't have any way to move up to the wave, try and poke it down, then run away. They don't have any way to escape out of ganks, meaning that they should be under pressure constantly. But with him getting First Blood for himself, he should tick over to 5 first. Sanctified Field is going to be a fantastic peel tool even into Arachne. Cyclone Spin has secured himself a very cozy start.
Yeah, that is a brutal lane to be in anyway with the Olorun and the Hercules for Obey. So no matter which way you slice it, it's a tough start. Now you've given them First Blood to boot. I am curious, though, that this Neath out of the mid lane is something that has worked really for Radiance very well. Big Man Tings has loved these traditional hunters out of that mid lane, more ability-based, of course, down the stretch. And I kind of want to echo what some of the devs said, is that the Radiance draft, I think, is just good, maybe specifically around some of those comfort picks. But Obey's draft is kind of fun. They have the fun factor, I think, on their side. Do you slice it one way or another? You feeling more confident in maybe the Radiance versus the Obey draft?
I think Radiance's draft being just a little bit more standard, even though we do see that Hunter coming to mid, it's essentially a double Hunter matchup.
Right.
I think that it is going to be a lot less execution-centric. They've got a much easier to execute on jungler. This Arachne being this volatile pick that we haven't had too much data on is going to be a huge question mark for me. And I think it doesn't even particularly fit the playstyle that we've seen from Sino in the past.
Right.
He likes playing these warrior-esque assassins. He likes playing Erlang Shen, Nike, gods like that can engage the fight on their own, create time in the backline, and then allow your own backline to start to move forward and catch up with you. On Arachne, it's similar. She wants to be in the enemy backline almost constantly, but she's looking for that, I'm going to pop my one, I'm going to pop my two, I'm trying to instantly kill them, and then I'll use my ultimate to disengage or continue the fight if I feel safe enough, instead of being able to sit in that backline for as long as you need to.
I appreciate everyone's patience. We're working on getting this game right back in for you guys, so we'll jump into this one as soon as possible. And kind of on the flip side of the coin there, Miff, when you look at this Robin now out of the jungle for adapting, you expect this pressure to sort of flow through in that early game. Maybe sort of one of the downfalls of the Arachne, and you can absolutely correct me here, is that it needs a little bit of time to scale up, you know, with some of these late game auto-attacking type junglers. So maybe the window for adapting is really in the early of this game to start to try to outpace Sino.
Yeah, I think adapting definitely wants to get involved early just by nature of being the Robin, but Arachne is one of the few auto-attack-centric assassins that can really get involved very early on. Normally, when you're talking about gods like Mercury, like Erlang Shen, the Nemesis, these auto-attack-centric assassins, you're looking for that third, fourth, fifth item slot to really start to hit your stride. But because Arachne's kit in of itself does so much damage and facilitates those auto attacks so incredibly well, around second or third item, Arachne's going to be incredibly strong. And at that point, there's no one on the map that should be able to 1v1 her ever.
Well, small invade being looked at now by Radiance. Red buff, first one of the game, looked at by Sino. Wolfie out of the mid lane. This Raijin not wildly mobile until that 3 comes online, but Aurora adapting BMT are going to make their way over to this red buff, and it looks like Sino's just going to have to leave it, but he gets knocked up, pulled right on back, second kill of the game, Radiance on the board yet again, and it's Sino once more that has taken the tumble.
Man, that's tough. It's getting a lot harder to sing the praises of Arachne when it's going to have an early game like this, but this isn't because Sino is playing Arachne. It's just the well-played, the good positioning from Radiance, the heads-up positioning to find those invades and the pressure that they're putting out.
Oh, is this maybe a bait? Cyclone Spin taken down low. The push back onto Wowie. The shell has been popped. So are the beads for Cyclone Spin. That's the roll on backwards from the Rom to stay alive. And inbound is going to be right back in on the front. The Pluck connects, but Cyclone Spin too quick on the beads. That's an immediate knockback onto inbound. Somehow, Mifflin, everyone stays alive. The action already flowing 2 minutes in.
That was such a heads-up play from inbound to realize that he had the health bar to stay involved in that fight, and he was able to pull out the beads from Cyclone, but maybe a little bit less heads-up here.
Oh, one more auto, and Cyclone Spin's not going to miss that one. Down goes inbound. A disastrous start for Obey Alliance 2 minutes into this game. So not only now has your jungler died twice at Sino, but now Aurora has 3 assists, Cyclone Spin has a couple of kills. This is brutal. And this is kind of the opposite of Radiance. You know, the action, the skirmishing in the early game, they're sometimes content just to draw it out. But they are building this lead up early. Mifflin, it's a 1,500 gold lead 2 minutes and 45 seconds into the game.
Yeah, let's call this a 2 minute and 45-second case study on why you shouldn't let Aurora play Hercules ever. I guess they've taken a little break from the league. Maybe Obey forgot just how dominant he is on this pick, but the facilitation factor, the pressure, the ability to rotate out a lane at level 2 and then find a kill on the enemy red buff and then go back into your lane, peel out for your carry, and find a kill on the tail end as well. This guy is controlling the map so early on, and he hasn't even truthfully rotated out. He's got a 1 level lead for himself inside that support role. It's looking tough for Obey, man. This Arachne's been relatively shut down does finally catch up to this Robin. I think the one weakness that Radiance's draft has that Obey need to look to exploit once they do get to that team fight phase is the fact that Radiance has 4 physical picks here. They can look for a little bit more of a bruiser-centric build out of the Arachne. We might even see a Void Shield come through, maybe a helmet on the Raijin, but there is one magical damage dealer on Radiance, and it's a pretty good one, Olorun. If I have only one, I think Olorun's the one I want, just that consistent damage output, that ability to crit with the auto attacks, this huge center of damage. Maybe Obey have to put a little bit of respect on him, even though he is the sole magical damage dealer. Absolutely
correct. Olorun will shred as this game goes on into that ring build, and especially when you've gotten the lead that now Radiance have. There's a small moment of maybe some advantage here. Cyclone Spin has his ultimate ready to go. Wowie and Inbound do not. Aurora, I imagine, will be close by as well. But instead, sort of a freeze/counter pressure type of scenario being set up here in the long lane. Cyclone Spin just trying to slow bleed out what we see here in this lane.
That's not generally how the magical ADC lane goes. It usually happens in reverse. The enemy team would be looking for that, but Ducky under pressure. That Neathult will land when he dunks. He's just gonna live barely.
He has 40 HP now. Maybe even a little bit lower than that, but the setup from Radiance is starting to flow here, and that's got to be worrisome for Obey. And especially, you know, after a prolongated break that these guys had, if you're a Radiance player or fan, you are nothing but thrilled, I think, with how Radiance have started off this game 5 minutes in. If you understand it, it was a bit of a slow start, but not here and not now. Sino looking to turn the tables a little bit onto adapting. Wolfie into the Taiko drums, adapting, trying to escape, but won't be able to do so as Wolfie has rotated in from the mid lane, and now Obey have finally gotten themselves on the board, and it's the Radiance jungler who falls.
That's a huge commitment from Obey, having to dedicate 3 ultimates essentially just to pick up Adapting, who didn't have his ultimate available to him. But we saw there that Sino's damage output is a little bit lacking right now. He decides to go for the Golden Blade early on in his build. Very signature of this style of jungle, meaning that he's going to be looking to farm up a lot more efficiently, but it's going to sacrifice a lot of that early game damage. Once he gets Warrior's Tabi or Ninja Tabi, whichever way he decides to go, we'll start to see whether or not he's going to go for a more ability-centric build on this Arachne, but it's going to be a long time until he's feeling confident in a team fight.
And I imagine, Myth, we're going to be seeing a lot of this, the free red buff invades, maybe even some purple invades as those start to come up off of cooldown. It's a long stretch back now, even from Wolfie, who's gotten himself on the board, but likely won't be getting his red buffs on cooldown now. That's allowing Radiance to pass their own red buff over to Cyclone Spin, so the small micro decisions here for Radiance absolutely paying off now in the short term, and they've got timers on both of those red buffs moving forward. One thing we haven't really gotten to touch on all that much, though, is the solo lane matchup. I think Benji on the Sun Wukong is not really anything we need more data points on. But Ducky here on this Thor, I certainly think is something worth looking at, maybe even worth talking about, especially considering his tower is about to be the first one to go down 6.5 minutes in.
Yeah, that's the pressure that Sun Wukong's going to bring. Ducky on this Thor is going to have the advantage in rotations, won't have the advantage in the fight. This is exactly what happens every single time he's going to step up. He's going to lose about 50% of his health bar. And this tower is likely going to go down pretty quickly. We're not going to see Sino try and rotate over towards the soul lane very often, just because Benji on Sun Wukong is nigh unkillable for Arachne. If you connect the stun, well, he'll bird form on the tail end. If you chase that down, he'll go up into the somersault cloud and survive that way. There's not really much kill potential over there, and we still haven't seen the Sun Wukong hit his power spikes. With Benji dominating the lane as he is, I'm pretty sure he's likely going to the Soul Eater route. Yep, looks like that's what he's going to do. Additional cooldown, additional survivability, power, penetration. That item is just a phenomenal stat stick. And Ducky, his poke potential is not going to be existent. He's not going to be able to do enough damage to counteract the sustain that Benji's going to get from Soul Eater.
I guess if there is, you know, a silver lining there with Ducky just a little bit behind Benji, is if Benji knocks down that tower, at least Ducky with the Thor ultimate, the Anvil of Dawn, provide a slightly clearer path as far as rotating into the fights as quickly as maybe Benji is able to do. Another red buff respawns. This time, Radiance are going to move their way in. Low is inbound, but now Wolfie's rotated from the mid lane, but Cyclone Spin pours out the damage, and Raijin takes a tumble here. Down from the sky, though, goes Wowie after dealing massive damage, as Sino will snag that one. Adapting still in the fight, though, but there's the double dunk from Ducky, and one more tallies the way of Obey. You'd think Radiance are feeling comfortable, a 2,000 or so gold lead going into that fight, but this one's split 2 for 2.
Man, Ducky doing exactly what he needs to do on Thor. If you can't win the lane, rotate out and try and help out the rest of your team. Use the strength of Thor in the early game and play him as that pseudo jungler. Sure, he gives up his tier 1 tower, but that's was going to go down anyway. He wasn't stopping Benji's push. He wasn't going to be able to fight into Benji there. So rotating in and turning that red buff invade into a 2-for-2 trade when it should have been a 2-for-1 or even a 2-for-0 in favor of Radiance is an incredibly heads-up play. Shouts to the Thor player on Obey.
I think the worrisome trend, though, still for Obey, and I absolutely give them credit for sensing out that red buff invade and turning around a couple of kills, is that it was a small downtick in the gold lead for Radiance, but then it was immediately made back up just a few moments later. Doug showed us the graphs there, and it has now been surpassed. And of course, that the ebbs and flows of the waves will change that slightly, but it's gone nothing but up. Despite Obey slowing this game down, Radiance have kept their foot on the pedal and are peeling away enough of this farm to keep Obey behind.
Yeah, that uptick 100% comes from that tier 1 tower that Benji was able to knock down.
Good point.
Which was a foregone conclusion anyway. It's going down either way. And take a peek here. We've finally got that Soul Eater finished up. Benji's showing zero respect to Ducky in this lane. He allowed him to hammer away at him, spin on him, all that he wanted. Benji just cleared the wave and continued moving on. And that's how that lane's going to go until they decide to rotate out and play as 5. There's really no kill potential for Ducky in a 1v1. Benji could do whatever he wants.
And Benji was slightly low there, but sensing the blue buffs back off of respawn, which means Sino's lurking close by, Benji's going to go back and collect a blue buff of his own. It's become a 2-level gap over in the long lane as well for Cyclone Spin. If anything, you hope that at least the Ola run has a slower start, but with the way this game has gone, now Cyclone Spin, the ball is really in his court. Not opting, though, Mifflin, for that Ring of Hecate, and that's something we started to see a little bit here more often than a little extra lifesteal on the back end of it. So sensing maybe he has the ability to go with a different route in his build because of how far ahead he is.
Yeah, his 1v1 potential is going to go down a little bit, just the ability to trade in and sustain through the damage that Wowie's going to bring. Not going to be as good, but Telkine's Ring is going to boost your own personal DPS immensely. It might be the single-handed best DPS item that you can pick up in that slot. So if Radiance are able to win out on another team fight, if they're able to push out or look for another 5-on-5 engagement, Gold Fury will be absolutely shredded by this point. I mean, this Ola run is going to be swinging for the fences, and 2 levels up against a Rom, one of the best physical hunters in the meta right now, that's not how you'd expect this lane to go at all.
You know, I suppose the lack of boxing potential that you maybe lose with the Telkine's Ring pickup is mitigated by the 3-level lead that Cyclone Spin has anyway. If Wowie overstays at all, I doubt the ring of choice is really going to make all that much of a difference. Though the ROM, safe enough, you can obviously roll out, use the ultimate if you need to prolong some of these fights anyway. But it's that next big move from Radiance where this game, only 12 or so minutes in, Mifflin, could start to become out of reach for Obey, and I do think maybe it starts to form around that Gold Fury, though the quick response from Ducky last time is maybe what you have to look out for. Likely won't be able to rotate over to this one. I wonder if this is where Radiance maybe start to pull this lead ahead, positioning around the Gold Fury. But taking this one slow, I think Radiance playing this one smart, waiting for everybody to get in range. Obey know this is happening, though. They've got some good ward coverage, adapting up, down, Sino deleted by the Radiance squad. Now there's the Thunder crash in immediately into the Tycho drums. Adapting is going to get traded out, a bit pinched there by Obey. A 1-for-1 trade. Ducky slams down onto Aurora. Half HP is the Hercules. Sustainable and tanky enough, though, to stay alive. And Obey Alliance look like they want to take that one and head out. Aurora nearly collapsing on inbound. But it's the 1-for-1, and Radiant's still positioning around this Fury.
With Ducky and Wolfie's ultimates down, they're going to be very cautious moving into this team fight. And we saw that Obey had a lot of time to react to that rotation. Because Benji decides to pick up Blink for his first relic, he has to rotate out a lane very early on, telegraphing the fact that Radiance are going to be looking for that engagement and looking for the Gold Fury itself. So Ducky's able to stick around in lane, clear out a couple waves, pick up the blue buff, and TP into the mid tower to set up for his ultimate, which is a heads-up play, and they get a trade that they really shouldn't have. Adapting just overstays his welcome.
Well, Gold Fury skirmish once more, half HP on the Fury, but reset now. Ducky knocked back and then pulled right into the waiting arms of big man Tings. A great setup now from Radiance. Up to the somersault cloud goes Benji, downhill slam. Gold Fury was reset, but plenty fast enough. Wowie takes to the skies to try to snipe this one away. No good this time around, and Radiance snags a kill and another big gold spike on the back end.
Good God, man. We're looking at 4,000 gold, 13 minutes of the game with a
Seems
7-4 slash on, but Obey fighting!
Oh, Sino has to use his ultimate to stay alive. Obey actually did a decent amount of damage. Aurora knocks back Wolfie, and that forces out the beads this time around. So you get the beads on the back end of things. It's going to make the Raijin maybe a little bit more susceptible. Playing with fire there are Obey, but they maybe sense they had a small opening.
They do. Man, this Arachne build, it's good. We already nailed it on the desk in that if Sino wants to have that 1v1 potential into Cyclone Spin, he's going to have to pick up that Toxic Blade. But this early on in the build is, again, going to hamstring his ability to not only damage objectives, but also even tanks or anyone on the enemy team. Normally, on Arachne, you'd see a Crusher or a Stone Cutting Sword or something along those lines to really elevate your 1v1 potential. It seems like Sino's really playing to the strength of late-game Arachne, which is the fact that with a blink in and the ability to just absolutely shred someone with all this attack speed, that you should be able to 1v1 even a tank at that level 20 mark. But he's sacrificing so much of the early game. But considering how the first minute went for this Arachne, it makes sense just that he got shut down incredibly early on. He knew he was going to get outpaced by adapting, so it's a smart pickup. But it tells me that Obey are really looking to just kind of drag it out as long as they can and then group up for 5 at that post 25-minute mark, which is not exactly where I would say we normally find Obey's strengths.
Hey, that's a nice peel away, though, by Obey. Take the Pyromancer, so a small bit of gold shuffles back into their pockets. And Mifflin, talk about sacrificing some early game damage here. An anti-heal being a necessity up against Radiance. Wolfie has opted for the Contagion after the Divine Ruin and Shoes of the Magi. So yeah, you get a little extra power with the boots you've selected. But no real damage stat stick on the Contagion there out of the Raijin.
I think it's just a direct counter to the fact that every single team fight that Wolfie's been in, he's getting this happening. Just tons of dive.
Just gets dove in the back line. He might survive this time. The Aegis is enough here, so looks like Wolfie will stay alive. But you can't say the same for Sino in the back. Aurora has found himself looked at now by 2 members of Obey. It's just the 1 kill and then the TKO onto Wolfie back to base. No beads, no Aegis for the next 30 seconds from that Raijin. Radiance continue to find themselves these small advantages. Of course, will opt for a little damage and some pen likely afterwards as Wolfie, but Contagion early on here maybe is enough there to keep him alive with Aurora, the one looking at him, but the blink right on through be dashed away by inbound this time.
Man, it's just an elongated fight that Radiance are obviously going to be the beneficiaries of, but the Contagion 100% saves Wolfie's life. Every single team fight, BMT looks for the ultimate, adapting, uses his own ultimate to follow up on it, and that was enough to do about 60% of his health bar before.
Oh man, this is a big Sanctified Field. Cyclone Spin alone with 3 members of Obey. Of course, Aurora was hanging around the side, but if you had any question on an update on this Olaron, that's where he stands, and he deletes the health bar of inbound here this time around. So if there's anyone you have to look out for, maybe it's the Olaron, who's now built the Bancrofts as well. And slowly but surely starting to build up maybe an insurmountable lead here for Obey. And really what's worse off now is that there's still a lot of towers standing where Radiance can start to build up this lead a little bit extra. Sino lurking close by in the long lane, but won't look for the gank just yet. It is a risky play when your own hunter is 3 levels down.
Yeah, just being on that side of the map might be a liability for Sino, but someone has to address Cyclone Spin. He just kind of has to hope that maybe Cyclone steps up a little bit too far, find that opportunity while the Sanctified Fields are still down, and potentially pick up a pick for yourself. We do know that Cyclone's beads are down. We traded out Inbound's life board a little bit earlier on in that engagement, and that's how that's going to go every single time. If Inbound is going to use Pluck to burn off Cyclone's beads, Cyclone is immediately going to Sanctified Field and then take away his entire health bar and potentially the team fight if anyone else tries to peel out for Inbound. I think this Sobek has to try and find someone else to burn it out on. You got to trust someone else to burn the beads off of this Olaron, just because trading out your life isn't really an option when you're this far down. Have Ducky do it with a wall from a range. Have Sino do it and then use his own ultimate to disengage. But every single time Inbound's going to try and do it, every single time he's tried to do it, he's lost his life.
I guess if there's a silver lining now for Obey is despite how far behind you are, 17 and some change minutes into this one, is you do have some consistent ways of putting damage into the backline. Ducky has already found a nice double stun. And of course Sino with his ultimate. Wolfie the Taiko drums reach some decent range. Wowie can snipe down, so the opportunities are there, but it's about stopping the bleeding here and trying to get to a point in this game where levels are somewhat equal. It's going to be a 3-man dive onto Cyclone Spin. That's certainly one way of doing it. And that's Wowie who now gets the kill. Aurora lurking in the waters is Inbound, looking at the Hercules. Up to the sky goes Ducky. Wondering where he'll drop down. Right into the back line is where he goes. So the nice pick. I guess you got to rotate 3 if you're going to do a Cyclone spin at this point.
Fortuitous timing as well, and that's no accident. Obey are going to look to take away the Gold Fury here and try to bring back a little bit of that bleed, but with the lead that Radiance have, they can fight in.
Oh, Obey lock this one down, but how about the fight afterwards? Radiance, they still want to go here. Frenzy is popped this time around. Sino chasing down, adapting, and Wolfie will thunder crash his way back in, but Wowie has his second kill in as many minutes here. The ROM starting to connect a little bit, and that 3-level differential is now shrunk down to 1. Massive turnaround now in this game for Wowie to find a couple of kills.
And that entire opportunity is afforded to Obey because Cyclone steps up a little bit too far in lane. He doesn't have beads, he doesn't have the sanctified field, and he didn't have the numbers to step up that far and feel safe. Obey immediately optimized on that positioning, and Radiance didn't really have the timing to get there and get a proactive or counteractive play, allowing for Obey to pull away the Gold Fury. Even when Radiance decided to put up a defense, they showed up a little bit too late. By the time they were in, the gold had already fallen, and Obey start the disengage, and Radiance chase it out too far, trading out a couple of their lives.
And the turnaround from adapting has been tough to watch as well. 3, 4, and 3, so he's affected 2/3 of the kills up to this point. But maybe to be expected, the Robin is the one that goes up, over, and in effectively in all of these fights, and Obey has been able to turn around the damage and knock down adapting, maybe a few too many times for his liking here up to this point. Still a 5,000 gold differential. Spear of the Magus, though, to check back in with Wolfie, so going back to some of that damage, a little extra magical penetration as well will certainly suit this Raijin well out of the mid lane. Now it's Pyromancer being looked at. Have to be careful, both teams taking a fight around this Fire Giant one way or another. Could be a free FG off to the other side.
Obey is going to have to play this very far back. I'm expecting to see Sino play as a solo agent in this engagement, especially considering BMT is going to be playing so far back, likely looking to engage the fight with his own ultimate. He might be left alone on an island, which is going to be an opportunity for Sino to dive into the back line, then use his own ultimate to re-engage or disengage if he sees fit. But with it fizzling out like this, it seems like Radiance is content not taking that risky engagement, instead moving the fight towards the center of the map where it opens up a little bit, where they're going to be favored on a straight-up fight just because Sanctified Field is going to be the best no-play zone that they have. But I don't think they need to afford this level of caution to Obey's draft at this point. As long as they're able to survive through Ducky's dunk, which should be the big difference maker as far as engage goes for Obey,
Agreed.
Radiance should very easily be able to take out the Pyromancer, even go towards the Fire Giant, force Obey to respond to your proactive play. But going ahead and farming up, waiting for everyone to hit level 20, not a bad option when you have an Ola run on your team.
Right, Ducky really is here for ultimate lockdown, and of course some bruiser ability here, but Benji's doing the real damage here, about 2,000 ahead, 20 minutes in, so not massive. Ducky not far behind either, so nothing to scoff at there. It's a 1 to 2 level lead for effectively everyone on Radiance's side across the board. BMT is just going to move over, look towards this Pyromancer. Both teams are sort of peeled off here. Mifflin, it's interesting maybe that Radiance are starting to slow things down here, because now it's sort of diminishing returns maybe on this lead, where Obey, they're doing all the catching up. Granted, to your credit, or to your point rather, everyone has not reached level 20 just yet for Radiance, but they're so far in the lead at this point, I'm surprised they maybe didn't push a little bit harder for a fight around the Pyro or maybe the Fire Giant.
Yeah, I agree with your point 100%. I think that they're playing very cautious. We might be able to chalk that up to the fact that maybe they're trying to work off some nerves. They're showing respect to the Obey roster because they haven't been able to play in the SPL in recent weeks, so they're just trying to get back into their own groove. But I think that they could definitely look to make a little bit more proactive plays. Even right now, we see Obey constantly moving up, constantly looking for engagements inside the center of the map, whereas Radiance are playing a little bit further back. Finally, though, Pyromancer should break the stalemate.
It's Obey who takes this one away. Radiance started up, and Obey finish it off. A pull away now for the Obey squad. Maybe that's why Radiance are so cautious. You got to look for the right fight, not necessarily a fight. The Radiance look for an objective there. And unfortunately, Obey are able to walk in and take it away. The fight after still maybe being looked at by Radiance here. Aurora looking over at 3 members, has the pull onto Ducky. The push being waited on. Excavate is going to plug down some damage. Ducky half HP has to leave. Maybe Radiance want to keep going underneath the tier 2.
They'll burn it away instantly with 2 Hunters. Obey have to put up a hard defense here if they want to stop it, but playing this far back, all they're doing is taking poke, and sticking around for this long, any bit of damage that they take is going to open up the opportunity for Radiance to back up and look for the actual Fire Giant. But it seems like Obey kind of hovering around right now. Radiance setting up an ambush in the jungle.
be able to do some decent damage there. So Contagion, again, not necessarily slowing down all that much. Maybe the big damage output. We know Radiance is always going to do some good work as this game moves on. Could be a collapse opportunity here with Inbound rotating around the left-hand side. Sino seems to agree. He'll blink in, sees big man Tings, down crashes Ducky, but it's the Sanctified Fields that's going to slow things down here. The stun connects, and Wolfie has enough damage, but it's a double stun in on Inbound, and Ducky here. The up-down from adapting won't connect for much. This fight is a bit split up here. Stun onto Cyclone Spin, Thunder Crash in. Wolfie's found a free ticket into the back line. Hasn't gotten the kill though. Cyclone stays alive. Benji is gonna get the kill onto Ducky. Elsewhere here in the map, somehow this Olaron stays alive, and Excavate is gonna slow down the retreat as Adapting rejoins the fray.
Adapting's looking to chase it out, forces off the Aegis from Wowie. The engagement continues. Wolfie's been left alone. Aurora's on the chase.
Oh, but it's a one-for-one trade on sort of the secondary engagement here, and it's a double kill from Wowie instead. Obey, it may have looked like they were lower, it might have looked like they were the ones on the back foot, but they kited well enough to bait Radiance in for a couple of kills on the backside.
What a nutty engagement. Obey starts it off by dedicating 4 ultimates solely to BMT. I mean, Obey come out ahead in general on kills, but they don't come ahead in terms of positioning on the map. They don't come out ahead in terms of gold swing or XP swing. They lose out on the tier 1 tower as well. And the immaculate peel that we saw from Radiance there, it was Cyclone Spin under constant pressure, and Aurora and Benji just peeling off on both sides.
Well, Sino had his ultimate, but unable to lock it down in time. So now a 1-minute death timer on the Arachne out of the jungle has been less than a star-studded performance for the Spider from what we've seen up to this point. Radiance think about the Fire Giant, but we'll think twice. The health bar is plenty low enough for Obey to maybe turn things around and start to capitalize there. Maybe a small opening now. Primal Fury is respawned on the opposite side. Likely will get sensed out by Inbound if it were started immediately. But that's surprising, Mifflin. I mean, we were both sort of thinking that Radiance needed to be the one pushing the advantage here, but Obey, the kind of back peel and then re-engage was just so strong, and maybe that's what Radiance were feeling as far as not wanting to fully commit to a fight.
I think it was just, on that Pyromancer, there was just a bit of poor communication and positioning from Radiance, allowing Obey to walk in and go for a very low damage steal. But now Inbound, no pluck, might be dead.
Oh man, he does have Working in the Waters though. So that's one ultimate now that's missing for maybe another engagement here. Do Radiance think that's enough of an advantage to start up this Fire Giant? That's been kind of the MO here is, you know, find a small engagement on one, force out the defensive ultimate from Obey, try it again a few moments later. But Obey have been able to slow down the bleeding from what they experienced early on. No pressure over onto the Fire Giant. Instead, Radiance, a couple members rotating over towards this Primal Fury. Obey still have 3, 4 even members lurking on this side of the map. But with no oracles for Obey, it's going to be a free Primal Fury over to Radiance.
Making Fire Giant all that much easier for them to burn down, which was already going to be pretty easy for Radiance's draft, having that double Hunter lineup. The crits coming out from the Olaron, the consistent damage from this Neath, who decides to go for an ability-focused build with a little sprinkling of auto-attack in there. The Heartseeker, the Crusher, the Transcendence, all going to make that ultimate much more impactful for BM teams. But throwing in that Atalanta's bow means that we're not they're sacrificing too much in terms of structure damage. So once they do get into the Fire Giant, once they start sieging into these Phoenixes, he's going to be an absolute threat that Obey are going to have to address. I think if Obey can just clean up the team fight a little bit, start disjointing their ultimates instead of committing all 4 at the exact same time, they'll have a better time.
That's a pluck onto Cyclone Spin. Does not use either of the actives. 2 of the 3 snipes connect. Aegis beads on the back end as Ducky drops on down. Inbound still alive, but look at the damage being spread onto the Radiance backline. Benji 1v4 elsewhere near the FG pit. The stun is going to connect onto Ducky, but the beads will save his life. It's an Excavate on the back end. Obey find nothing but death for Inbound, and Radiance, they're the ones looking maybe a little bit extra shaky here. Obey are looking for these fights, but it's Radiance now starting up the Fire Giant. Aurora still on the front line. Sino now has to use his ultimate. Up and over he goes. Wolfie into the Taiko drums, taunting back in Aurora. Benji trying to control the backline here. Aurora has been lost by Radiance, but big man Tings is able to pull back 1. Obey still 2 members down. Radiance only 1.
Well, Inbound going for that pluck is such a huge question mark. Sure, you burn the relics off of Cyclone Spin, but no one's in range to follow up. Of course, you're going to lose out on your life there every single day of the week.
Right.
And this Olaron still has Sanctified Field. He's going to be able to drop it to help DPS the fire.
Oh, Ducky! I think he was the one who maybe peels that one away. No, it was Raiju from Wolfie out of the mid lane. Obey Alliance do it again. They take another objective out of the fire pit. And the Pyromancer is the second place prize now for Radiance. Obey have not only kept themselves in this game, and Mifflin, I'd argue we're dead even.
Dead even with Fire Giant on 4 members with 6 towers still available on the side of Radiance for Obey to try and burn through and start to level out this lead. It depends on how Radiance decide to play it. I doubt we see them group up on these tier 1s. They might put up a soft defense, just try and buy away a little bit of time, slow down Obey. But those tier 2s are where the real gold's at. That's where I expect we see Radiance put up a real defense. They don't have to give up too much ground right now. They still have a 6,000 gold lead in their favor. But what a questionable play to go for the Fire Giant there. Only 3 members from Radiance in any range to really put any damage into it. The best damage ability you have to confirm it is Spirit Arrow. That's not very high. That's a very low margin of error that Radiance have afforded themselves, and instead we saw 86 damage from a Raiju is all that it took for Obey to strip the fire their way. I would have liked to see Radiance played a little bit safer.
And you know, I say we're even, but maybe it's really Obey now that have all of the pressure pushing against Radiance. I mean, the tower is still able to be taken. A lot of openings are about to spring forth now for Obey. And you know, this is maybe the opposite, Mifflin, of what we expect from both of these teams. Obey, throughout the phase so far, have gotten off to these hot starts and just have not had the ability to close out games, whereas Radiance are sort of the opposite, where, yeah, they'll find some first bloods, you know, not necessarily consistent one way or the other. I mean, they're consistently good, don't get me wrong, but they like these late-game team fights that suddenly spring things back in their favor. Obey stalled out this game. They hit the brakes, and now I'd argue maybe it's theirs to lose.
It really is. They're now closed up the gold lead just about entirely. 3,000 gold separating these two teams at 30 minutes means nothing, but that it's still effectively a 6,000 or 7,000 gold lead in favor of Radiance because Obey hasn't spent any of it. But Aurora isolated?
Oh, that could be big utility now for Obey if they're able to get this kill. Thunder Crash in. Goodbye, Aurora, but a lot of ultimates. Just 2, though. Spent 1 defensively now by adapting. Actually, rather 4 ultimates looks like got used there onto Aurora. So maybe an opening if Radiance look to re-engage, but they've got the numbers disadvantage. Obey continuing to spring these traps, and Radiance continue to fall for them.
And they're going to look for a Phoenix push. They've already sent Sino into that long lane, trying to split up the map just a little bit. 30 seconds left on Aurora. That's a ton of time to work with.
It's a 4-for-1 split here, and despite that, still maybe an advantage for Obey out of the mid lane. Adapting is going to have to rotate over. He's the one dealing with Sino here. That's going to leave a numbers disadvantage out of the mid lane. Stun connects onto inbound, but it's a double stun from Ducky to slow down the engagement. Benji cannot get into his ultimate, and Wowie has now found the kill that has maybe finally broken Radiance's base. 5 members of Obey are going to rotate over to the left-hand side.
50 seconds on Benji. This is still a ton of time. Huge advantage. Adapting goes down.
Wowie opening kill now. Aurora trying to back himself off. Ducky up to the skies. He's just playing patrol here, and he will end up dropping down. 5 members of Obey against 3 of Radiance. You just need 1 moment, 1 engagement. You can complete the turnaround here. The pluck onto Aurora might just get it done, but it's a sanctified field from Radiance to try to claw their way back in. Inbound is going to get locked down by big man Tings. Ducky eats the double kill. Cyclone Spin and BMT have kept this game alive.
That was a huge sanctified field to slow down that push, but BMT's Oboe might be the MVP.
Cyclone Spin will get another as Wolfie goes down. It was 2 against the world, a bit sloppy to say the least from Obey, and their attempt to end the game. But I think you have to look at this one holistically, Mifflin. There's a mid lane Phoenix gone, a left side Phoenix is down as well. Obey, they can slow this thing down for the next 30, 45 seconds, and a wide open pace for Radiance. But now Cyclone Spin being engaged upon by Sino right on the other end. Is Wowie, excuse me, anyway. Benji maybe sensing an opportunity for a couple of kills here is at least gonna get 1, and that's an important one to get. Down goes Wowie. Primal Fury as well is gonna get started up by Radiance on the back end of the fight. So suddenly on one side of the map, it's Radiance literally backs against the wall, 3 versus 5, and the ranged damage are the ones that are able to get things done here. Radiance are going to slow down this map. The Primal Fury there as well, and you wonder, if that's maybe the opening they need to move forward and start to contest something over here on this Fire Giant side, especially now that Adapting and Aurora are the ones starting to pivot in this direction.
It just seems like such a risky call for them to be able to move into this Fire Giant, having 2 Phoenixes down. They're going to have to contend with Fire Minion waves slowly flooding into their base. I think Radiance might have to be in a situation where they back up, allow Obey to pick up a Fire Giant for themselves, and look for the defense. Again, if we see Cyclone Spin get a little bit more proactive with the Sanctified Field, use it before we see the Siege from Obey truthfully work out, they could fight into it much better. We already know that BMT's damage output is immaculate. They're doing so much for themselves. And even with these fights starting to swing in Obey's favor, we haven't seen a huge amount of value coming out of Sino on this Arachne. I would even go as far as to say that it's almost a 4 versus 5 for Radiance, just because this Arachne's having such a hard time finding its way into the backline. The best that Sino can do at this point is split up the map, and when there's only 1 Phoenix left, that's not really an option. They've really got themselves a situation where Radiance has manufactured a true 5-on-5 once they get to that base defense.
Wow, Obey are looking at the Fire Giant here. Aurora and Benji are in there alone. The wall from Ducky separates the engagement. Big Man Ting's World weaves an ultimate into the backline, but Aurora taken low and now taken down by Wolfie. Benji has to use his ultimate here to stay alive. Luckily for Radiance, maybe Adapting gets one onto Wowie. Can Benji retreat in time? Sun Wukong is certainly good at doing that. The pluck beads out, but you can't beads out the second stun. Wolfie, one more shot from the drums, and he's got it. 3 for 1, and Obey find another win.
I think they back to base here, heal up. I don't think Fire Giant really even needs to be on the menu. With 40 seconds left on the nearest respawn for Radiance, if Obey moves quickly, they might be able to break the base again. That mid-Phoenix is coming up so quickly, might as well take it before you go for the Fire Giant, or even potentially the game. Only ultimate available on the side of Radiance right now is Sanctified Field, and it's weird to use the word only when you're talking about something so strong, but we've seen it now and time again that this Sanctified Field has been largely ignored by Obey. They're willing to fight into it or around it. It doesn't really matter.
Inbound is going to usher in the last couple waves of Fire Minions into the mid lane. Might even be able just to take down the Phoenix all on his own. In the meantime, on the back end of this, Obey looking at the enhanced Fire Giant. They have plenty of damage to get it done, provided Inbound buys enough time, and he's absolutely done that. Nobody from Radiance anywhere close. So Obey, this time, are going to start it up on their own and take it down on their own. Not a steal needed here for Obey. And Mifflin, I can't believe I'm saying this, but 35 minutes in, it almost feels like just a matter of time. If Obey can regroup and push in, Radiance, whether they hit the brakes or Obey dug in their heels, this game was stalled out and has now maybe been ripped away from them.
But now that all the Phoenixes are back up and we're in a situation where Radiance has all 5 members strong, all the ultimates available, Obey are going to have to re-siege the entirety of Radiance's base. The Phoenixes are a little bit weaker, so it will be very easy. If Obey even finds their way in, if Wowie's able to touch the Phoenix even once, it'll melt away instantly. Radiance are going to have to put up a hard defense on the Phoenix line or even further down the lane outside of it, because they can't allow Obey to touch this Phoenix even a single time. If they go for the mid or the left, it's going to be tough.
What's helpful, though, is Emperor's Armor, and that's what Inbound is locked in for his maybe final item here. So slowing down some of that siege is maybe exactly what Obey need. An interesting item choice that maybe gives Obey a small edge.
I don't know. Emperor's Armor right here, it's helpful, especially if they're going for that right side Phoenix, but with the Phoenixes as low as they are, slowing them down, not really a big deal. 3 auto attacks is really all it's going to take to be able to shut down one of these birds. Normally you would see a Guardian go a little bit more damage-centric with that last item, or even just some true defense. Urchin might have gone a long way, or Stone of Gaia to help out with the sustain. But if this is going to be an elongated defense, if Radiance let them into the Phoenix and are able to keep it alive for a good period of time, Emperor's Armor could certainly get some huge value.
Look at this split, though. 1-1-3 is what Obey are looking at here. Big Man Tings, of course, has the ability to affect a fight elsewhere with his ultimate. Wonder where the engagement maybe starts here. Sino feeling a little bit more comfortable. World Weaver on the back end finds some good damage. That's what's going to open the door for Adapting. He doesn't need his ultimate here. Down goes Sino. And Obey are going to take that as their call to go out. A big 1v1, a couple of ultimates for Radiance. But it keeps most of their base alive. The mid lane Phoenix did end up falling.
You know what? Not in 100 years did I expect to see inbound solo down a mid Phoenix. That's where Emperor Armor is going to get its value
Emperor's
from.
Armor, baby, let's go!
Yeah, you got it, Dave. I had no clue that was the option. I mean, he was swinging on that Phoenix for 38 damage and auto attack. He had a lot of time that he had to work through there, but BMT with a global ultimate makes the very wise decision to focus out Sino on the opposite side of the map. There's no shot that any singular member of Radiance is going to be able to shut down that Sobek in mid. They could have stopped the push, they could have returned damage, but they wouldn't have been able to kill him. So adapting, getting the use of that SMITE ultimate sets him up perfectly to make sure that Sino can't continually push down that lane. I think it's an interesting decision to see Sino decide to dunk back down into the Phoenix range when he knew the Neath ult was going to hit him. Had he decided to fully disengage, he likely would have lived.
I suppose luckily, though, for Obey, all that really does is open the door for Radiance to step a toe out of their base for the first time in the last few minutes. It's going to be Oni fire minions down the mid lane. The problem, though, for Obey is all of the objectives are gone off the map, and literally the only thing you can take here at this point are the Phoenixes. Granted, and this is what we're starting to see again, Mifflin is inbound on his own on the left-hand side. As far as the widest width you're going to have to cover on defense, left and right side Phoenixes are going to make it difficult.
It really will. I don't imagine we see Cyclone Spin be the one dedicated to stopping him. His ultimate is going to be so hugely impactful in these team fights.
Ooh.
They need this Olaron on the concentrated defense.
Sino, I don't know if I call it a full-on engage, but is going to get the Somersault Cloud out of Benji. Around the backside is adapting here. Bubble popped by Sino. Two members of Radiance looking at the spider here. The ultimate is going to disengage from the fight. Obey a numbers advantage on the right-hand side of the map now. Sino maybe is just buying time. World Weaver even tried to use to lock down Sino here. Aurora taunted back in. Out of the mid lane by Wolfie. Sino, he goes down to adapting. Obey take down the right side Phoenix, though, and once more will back their way away.
Sino gets a lot more value for his life there than he really has any right to. He's able to pull away Adapting's attention. He's able to pull away Aurora's BMT's ultimate as well. But this Arachne really isn't doing anything. But by that same note, he doesn't need to. As long as someone has to look at Sino when you're in this advantageous position, it doesn't really matter what you're able to do as long as you can keep someone on your back, keep them away from the defense, and it opens up Obey to taking away yet another Phoenix. That right side Phoenix does go down for free, and it's also made a little bit easier by the fact that inbound on that left side of the map was able to absorb the attention of Cyclone Spin, removing the idea of Sanctified Field, even stopping a push there as well. Obey are playing smart around splitting up the map, but I think, again, they could just clean it up just a little bit. They don't have to take these trades if they decide to play just a little bit safer.
Well, we've reached the 40, almost 41-minute mark in this game. That means the boots are going back to the shop, and some of your extra items on the back end are starting to arise. That's going to affect this fight here. The early poke going the way of Radiance. It's Obey who have to backpedal their way away. Cyclone Spin doing enough damage to this Pyromancer. There won't be much of an answer by Obey. Radiance still feeling, and this is where this juggle becomes difficult.
They pulled it.
You almost have to go now, right, with the mid lane fire minions in the right side starting to get closer to your base. Maybe the only opening was right then, but Radiance cautiously back off.
Yeah, they got a little heat check on the DPS, realizing that it's not really quick enough to pull it away, but Aurora caught out.
Oh no, he's off on his own, and that's going to be a kill here for Obey. It's Wowie who gets this one. Wolfie jumped on by adapting. A 1-for-1 mid laner for support, but a double kill from the Rom is maybe exactly what the doctor ordered for Obey. Benji takes to the sky. Somersault Cloud used defensively here. Cyclone Spin, still poking down damage. A 2-for-1, but that keeps Radiance and Obey both exactly where they were.
It's a deadlock as far as the base goes, with two members going down on the side of Radiance. Fire Giant, there's no contention point. Radiance have to give this one up with Obey able to move in. They keep the Hunter alive.
Has to be.
They keep Sino alive. There's so much DPS potential. I don't imagine we see anyone step up, but look where Radiance is positioning. Cyclone still hovering on the right side of the map, as is BMT. If he trades out his life here, he might just trade the game.
4 versus 3 for the next 25 seconds around this enhanced Fire Giant. Radiance lurking close by, mid lane and right side fire minions pushed out. No more fire minions out of the mid lane, but a large minion wave starting to form on the left-hand side of the map. Obey, pull out the FG. Benji close by, no Somersault Cloud to stay alive. Obey, they lock down this one. Benji has to use the defensive utility there, but Ducky's in the sky. He's gonna stun down Benji, and Sino gets the kill. Now you're missing your solo laner for 70 seconds.
That's huge. That frontline potential, the backline disruption, all going to be gone on this push. And it might be just the most important push of the game. Mid Phoenix still at about 50% health, meaning that if Wowie touches it, it's going to go down. The person whose job it was to create that space and make sure that Radiance could keep them out of the Phoenix was Benji, but for the next 50 seconds, he's going to be MIA.
Big Man Tings has done big man damage this game, 36,000, but close behind is Wowie, who was 3 levels behind throughout the large portion of this game. He's got a 3,000 damage gap over anyone else here in this game, so Obey absolutely happy with the turnaround they've experienced here. Inbound slowing down this Phoenix here, but there's an engagement in the mid. Obey has been taken down to half HP. That's a huge ultimate from Adapting, and it's a double kill from the Robin. Mid lane Bird still standing. Obey again. We're gonna have to disengage. Radiance have defended once more. Sino, though, luckily able to at least get the right side Phoenix.
Gets the right side Phoenix, and he trades out BMT's life in the backline, meaning that Radiance doesn't really have much chase down potential. It's all up to Adapting, and it looks like he is going to be trying to defend his speed. Easily, might I add. Just a 3-1 combo going to put Sino 6 feet under. That's a good base defense from Radiance. They were able to maintain their mid Phoenix. Losing on the right is going to hurt just a little bit, but that is the easiest side of the map to defend once we move ourselves into another Fire Giant defense. And with only 2 members left on Obey with an EFG, we might just be looking at another Fire Giant defense.
Hey, Myth, what are you up to for the next 3 minutes? Just chilling?
You know, waiting on spawns, waiting for Fire Giant, whatever it takes. But Radiance, for the first time, has been able to step up a little bit further. They expose one of the Phoenixes. If Radiance wins out cleanly on an engagement, 44 minutes into the game, we don't care if 2 tier 2 towers are up. That mid-Phoenix being exposed is a win condition for the boys in blue.
Right, it is the win condition at this point. If you get enough kills, you're far enough into this game where that Titan is going to fall nonetheless. Primal Fury, the great Fury to have here. Obviously, you know, Oni would have been helpful there as well, pushing out some of the waves that are starting to crash in. But as far as contesting a Fire Giant that'll be coming up here shortly, very important for Radiance to maybe look their eyes towards that one. The dive has kind of been exchanging, it feels like, Mifflin, where it's kind of Ducky locking down someone on the back, and maybe that's exactly what you expect, but Adapting finally connecting on a big ultimate. He was 3-4-3, must have been, what, 15 minutes ago when we checked in on him. He's now 10-7-6. We've gotten 7 kills, 4 deaths, and 3 assists over that time span. This Robin, you think about him as an early character, but when you get to this point, it's about making the plays, and Adapting has done enough to keep Radiance in it.
And 5 of those 7 kills he just recently picked up, likely on this Arachne. He's really got Sino's number this game. It's been tough, man. He's been forced to use that ultimate, the Arachne that is, to disengage every single time. Maybe we have a chase here, though.
I don't know if you even need the Fire Giant if you're going to lock down the tanks of Radiance. Aurora is going to get plucked back in. Benji taken low, taken down. Wolfie has gotten the kill there. Obey Alliance push down on the gas here. Can you finish off Aurora fast enough? Yes, you can. It's Inbound who gets the kill. Cyclone Spin drapes the Sanctified Field right back over. But that is just a delay. Obey Alliance still 5 strong, looking towards the mid lane.
0 value Sanctified Field means it's no longer available for the defense. This Ola run is going to be left high and dry. That wall huge.
Oh, Cyclone Spin, I say goodbye, but instead it's Inbound who takes too much damage. Cyclone turns it around with just the beads. And once again, Obey Alliance are going to back themselves off. They did get the Phoenix, so nothing more to fight for here out of the mid lane. But regrouped is 4, and elsewhere on the map they go. Cyclone Spin has come up big now a couple of times in the back of his base.
Man, Cyclone Spin has been teaching Inbound every step of the way. It's been a 46-minute lesson to Inbound. If you're gonna pluck me and my beads are up, you're just going to die. I don't think at 47-minute mark, trading out your support's life for 1 relic really is value. I'm sure Aggro's rolling his eyes at me saying that a support's life has any value. But I mean it at this point. Inbound's been able to not only take down Phoenixes on his own, he's been disrupting the backline, finding huge engages. That first fight that starts in the middle of the map there in favor of Obey starts off a pluck from this Sobek. They need him to be the difference maker on that repositioning tool. But with 10 seconds left on the Fire Giant spawn, I'm sure Obey is just fine taking away that mid-Phoenix, setting up on that right side and picking up another EFG for themselves. It's not too big a deal if Inbound's not going to be alive for this one.
All right, it's only 5 seconds remaining, so he'll at least get the buff if Obey take it, but Obey and Radiance have slow played these engagements with full 5-on-5s on the horizon, so You imagine Obey will be just fine to slow things down and wait for Inbound to get back. And I think, Inbound on a whole, even outside of this specific game, over the last few sets that Obey have played, has looked a lot better. So big props to him out of that support role, and absolutely a contributing factor in keeping Obey in this 48-minute game. Welcome back, SPL. It was a long break, but we're happy to have you here. And already a game balanced on a knife edge between Radiance and Obey. And these next few minutes we think might make the difference, but the miraculous base defenses from Radiance have been enough to keep them in the game here. How about an engagement onto BMT? You're forcing the beads out of the mid lane, or adapting up, down, unable to stay alive. Snipes from Wolfie and an engage from Ducky, but they don't want to follow up on Aurora. Instead, it's the enhanced Fire Giant being looked at.
But Radiance isn't willing to give it up. They've already lost out on Adapting's life, but they continually step forward. They're thinking to themselves, if they get the EFG here, Obey that is, it's a game loss. So Rourke dedicates his blink just to reposition.
Obey might not give him the chance to steal it away. The Fire Giant has been reset. Inbound, left alone. One-man sanctified field, but it's not enough to get the kill. Maybe shortly here, Cyclone Spin will hit those final autos, but instead Inbound stays alive.
Right?
He dodged out a lot of the damage. You've gotten BMT and Cyclone Spin pulled out of the rest of the engagement, so he's bought time. But another trade happens to Benji elsewhere. This one is a 1-for-1, and finally the Fire Giant being looked at again.
With Wolfie and Sino still on it, it should be easy to burn down. Inbound does a good job of buying a lot of time and giving the information to his team on where BMT and Cyclone are positioned at, making it a lot less safe for them to step up and look for that steal potential. This Pyromancer, sure, it's a little icing on the cake. Everyone's got elixirs already. We're all true 6 item slotted. We're 50 minutes into an SPL game. These guys have got 130,000 gold going both ways. That Pyromancer's just going to make it a little bit easier for them to leave that base. And again, we're moving into another Phoenix siege situation. The mid Phoenix going to be down for a couple more seconds with that right side Phoenix being so low, that left side Phoenix getting as healthy as it's ever going to be. I think Obey's got a very good chance of being able to burn through the base here, but we've been saying that for the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, we sure have, Mifflin, and it feels like an eternity now, and I'm sure Obey fans and really Radiance fans feel the exact same. Because no team has been able to get a clear advantage. I say that. There was a 5 versus 3 base assault for Obey about 20 minutes ago, 15, 20 minutes ago maybe. It's been that long, actually, I have no idea. But there was a 5 versus 3 nonetheless for Obey. And then a good defense from BMT, Cyclone Spin, able to stall that one out. So, as far as equal goes, this one is exactly that. Fire minions still pushing in towards that mid lane Phoenix. Obey Alliance, you wonder if they're just lurking. The MO has largely been find a pick and then maybe try to assault elsewhere. Maybe you get the sense that that's what they're looking for still here.
No shot Radiance gives them that opportunity. They're sitting firmly within their own base. Obey is going to have to work as hard as they've ever worked for one of these sieges, and it seems like it is going to be a 3-1-1 split. Arachnian mids, Sobek and Solo, the 3 core members of Obey, trying to push down the opposite side of the map. Radiance has to make a decision here. They've got a lot of time to work with. That Sobek is going to take a very long time to chop down that right side Phoenix. So if Radiance wants to put up a 4-1 defense to slow down that mid push from Arachne, and then try and take a full-on engagement and a 4 versus 3 on the opposite side of the map, that could work out, but Arachne seems to have regrouped with Sobek on the opposite side at 3-2.
Yeah, it's an interesting split they're going for here. Radiance still playing cautiously. You don't know exactly where the 3 members of Obey are lurking. But if Radiance had sensed that and maybe had more consistent long-range engagement, of course they have big man Tings in the World Weaver, but Radiance not trying to push out too far. They don't want to overextend here. That's what has maybe slowed down some of the defenses up to this point. Instead, now they look to engage. Wowie has to use the Aegis to stay alive here. Excavate is going to get the ROM down to half HP. Somersault Cloud up, down from Benji, but right back up goes Wowie. They're trading places here. It's a Sanctified Field from Cyclone Spin. Ducky drops down, gets rid of the Ola Run. Radiance, they've saved their base, but have they? In the back line, Sino inbound, working their way at the Titan. And it's a 3-for-1, and Radiance again has stayed alive.
They have, and they've done more than just stay alive. 4 members dead on the side of Obey. Inbound's the only one left alive for 60 seconds. Radiance could very easily try and move their way down to the Phoenix. It's going to be a tough task. Inbound has to keep his own base alive for a full minute.
That's a long time.
Own. Yeah, there's so much damage output as well, but Cyclone Spin being dead on the side of Radiance might make it a little bit harder. All Inbound has to do is to create space. Don't let BMT be the one to step in. Slow him down here. Best shot you got.
He's doing exactly that, working through the waters. 30 seconds on the nearest respawn timer, half HP. Here's the Crocodile. The Mantle Stun pays off in dividends here. Inbound is going to dash away, but a couple members of Radiance have given up, and they're starting to look towards the Phoenixes, adapting now in a perfect spot to close out this game. One more auto's all we need. It's the delayed deicide. 53 minutes in. Radiance, they stay alive, and they are going to win this game. Obey crumble at the last minute.
The mental fortitude Radiance has to have to defend their own base for 20 full, uninterrupted human minutes, to borrow a little bit of a moniker from my buddy Finch, is insane. The ability to have a roar, make that hard decision, that's an all or nothing play engagement from Radiance on that left side of the map. If they lose there, they lose the game. If they lose one member, they lose the game. But instead, they're able to turn that fight into a good one. Obey just split the map too hard with 3 members alone over there. No way they win that fight.
That is mental fortitude, disengaged fortitude, whatever you want there from Radiance. Massive from them. They defended their Phoenix lines and then their Titan for the last 25 minutes of this game. This one just shy of an hour to welcome back the SPL after our bye week. I do think there has to be some hope. Again, this is an Obey team that was down big early. What was it? 3, 4, 5,000 gold differential 10 to 12 minutes in. So I think it's good on Obey to hit the brakes and slow this game down. But ultimately, the engage is not consistent enough. The siege is just too difficult. Inbound, a better game. Unable to kind of solo push out some of those Phoenixes. So promising stuff from Obey, but Radiance, they're the ones who win this one in just shy of an hour. We'll have what I'm sure will be the exciting game 2 of this set right after this quick break.
You will sleep now. A long sleep.
Welcome back to the SPL. A bit of a doozy there for Radiance as they go the extra mile to find the win up against Obey at a 53-minute barn burner. Speaking of going the extra mile, our art team went the extra mile with this new T5 Hell skin that you got to make sure you're picking up. Let me make sure I get all the details straight here for you. Eclipse Summoner Hell is the new Tier 5. Earn Odyssey points to unlock Smite's newest Tier 5 skin, obviously the Eclipse Summoner Hell skin, and buy all skins and cosmetics in the event and get instant access to Eclipse Summoner Hell today. Sounds pretty fun to me. Hell's a whole lot of fun. Make everyone else have a lot less fun when you play that god. So get out there and get to work. Meanwhile, I've got Aggro here with me on the desk. We got to talk about this great defense from Radiance, collapse from Obey. I don't think collapse is fair because that early game was brutal. How do you want to characterize this one in 53 minutes?
Man, it was back and forth, to say the least. Both teams made a ton of mistakes in this game, but both teams also made a ton of really, really great plays. I mean, Aurora was doing absurd things in the early game. He single-handedly set Radiance up to win this game, but then a couple bad fights don't go Radiance's way. Ducky makes some fantastic rotations in order to make sure that the lead does not slip away from Obey too much. Inbound late game was phenomenal. His setup and his tanking was great. The way that he was splitting Phoenixes worked well initially, but I think was the reason that Obey really crumbled at the very end. The first time Inbound split push to Phoenix, it was Cyclone Spin who was sent to defend him, and that's a huge win. If you can take Sanctified Field out of your 4v4 or 5v5, then you're going to win the vast majority of the time. So that was great. But then Radiance made the perfect response. They just decided, hey, who cares? We'll do things like this, where Adapting just goes in. As soon as they see it Inbound on a side Phoenix, they ignore him. He'll get it with enough time, but we'll just win the team fight. And that's exactly what ended up happening in that final push as well. I think Obey came in with a good game plan. I liked the way they were playing the map, but at the very end, Radiance had adjusted to the way that they were playing these sieges, and I wanted to see Obey adjust to that adjustment, and I don't think they did that well enough.
I don't think so either. It's a difficult task, though, for Obey in such a lengthy game after making so many good plays to find that last bit they needed, but it just was not there. Radiance with an excellent performance, 47,000 damage for Tings on this Neath. You think Hunter mid is good? Well, Tings is showing you that the answer here is yes. And really what this felt like to me was that Obey had opportunities to close this game out. How many times did just the backline of Radiance save this game underneath their Phoenix, even without Sanctified Field a couple of times, because Cyclone Spin had used it earlier to a mixed bag sort of result. I think that Obey had their chances there and couldn't quite cleanly get in there to settle it. It's a lot that's going on in those comms in those big moments. It's a huge moment for your team, and I think Obey fell just a little tiny bit short.
And I think you're right to highlight Big Man Ting, because he's another reason why that split push strategy is really, really difficult to execute on, because normally Arachne is set up to win her 1v1, but it's not a 1v1 because you've got a World Weaver coming in, and that's why we saw Sino pick up the Magi's, but it's just the damage that you're going to be able to provide with that ultimate. It's not just the CC. Big Man played great this game. The backline is a really good place to highlight. I thought that Big Man in particular, Cyclone got caught out a couple times. That did not really happen to Big Man too much. I thought he played lights out in this game. You have to if you're going to do 50k damage almost as Neath in a game.
Yeah, very impressive stuff. Remember, Wolf even picked up the Contagion in that game. A lot of interesting small things happening in that one and trying to determine who came out the winner. But that's in the past. The future is game number 2. Let's get into those picks and bans and see exactly what Obey are trying to do to bounce back after probably a bit of a heartbreaker. They were behind at the beginning. It looked like a typical Radiance game where they were running over Obey, up by 5,000 gold, and Obey clawed their way back in. But now, how do they keep their mental straight? How do they stay in this set and make sure they can still be competitive here with Radiance? It's tough.
It is, but this Obey team has shown to be scrappy. That's the way I think about this Obey team, is that you really can't count them out. They're going to make some really good plays if you give them the opportunity. They're going to create their own opportunities a lot of times. This team is one that needs to be respected. I don't think that you can come into an Obey set expecting a free win these days, man. These guys will make you work for it every single time, and I think they did that very well in game number 1.
And ironically, I think they did it without a ton of help from Sino. I mean, this was not the best Arachne game we've ever seen. A lot of focus is on Sino. Maybe that's part of the reason why. Neath Ultra going his way a lot of the times. Adapting seemed to have a personal vendetta at times instead of defending structures. Was looking for Sino, but still, just good work there, I would say, all around from Obey and Radiance. Now that we're into these bans, though, here for the next game, Freya and Tsukiyomi banned, Olaran and Persephone banned. So far, fairly the same, except for the one glaring thing here. Radiance are banning away the Olaran even after Cyclone Spin's game. Is this just the difference between first and second pick?
Partially. I think it's also the way that Radiance had trouble ending game, really transitioning their lead was because of some of those moments where Cyclone got caught out. You put him on something like Cupid or Rom, those might not happen. Something with a little bit more survivability. So maybe Radiance wants to change up their draft, but certainly being in second pick changes the way that they're going to ban. Just like it changes Obey, they decided to ban away Kuzenbo themselves this time around. This leaves Ama open. That's the number one thing that I'd be looking for here if you're Obey. They decide to go for Rom, and I just don't love this as a first pick for Obey. While he played really, really well in game 1, do not get me wrong. He had a very, very good game. But Rom and Cupid are close enough that I don't think it's really worth picking one over the other in a first pick slot, especially when things like Ama and Cthulhu are still open. There is some argument that now, Radiance isn't going to take Ama and Cthulhu, so you can at least get one on the back end, so you take your preference on the ADCs, and then you get the leftover of the solo laners, if that's the way you want to go. But Cthulhu was open in game 1 until the second phase, if my memory serves, and neither team picked him. I think in this spot, Radiance gets to do exactly this. Ama and something else, let Obey pick 2 gods, and then pick Cupid before the second ban phase, and I think Radiance is ahead.
And I actually really like this from Radiance. I'm glad you brought up Wowie, because I think in the mid-game, around that 22-minute mark or so, it was basically Wowie keeping Obey in it, having a great game on the ROM, set up by this Thor from Ducky in solo. So now, Radiance have kind of limited Ducky on 2 axes, right? They've taken the Ama, the best solo laner out there, which should help Benji in that matchup a lot, and they now have this Thor, too. So that means Ducky falls down to the Sun Wukong. Not a very far fall, Wukong very, very good, but still, I think this is Radiance kind of saying, hey, Obey, you're not going to get the same thing to work for you that did in game 1, and again, that didn't completely even work anyway. They didn't get the win. I like this response here so far, especially because Wolfie ends up back on this right.
Yeah, I mean, it was okay. I thought he had some good moments in that game, but there were also a lot of moments where I was just watching the damage he was putting out, and part of it was because he was forced into contagion against a 4 physical composition where he was getting Neath and Robin ulted all the time, and that's understandable. But I just don't know that Raijin brings enough these days. I just don't. I'm not in love with the pick. And I don't think that Obey is in love with the pick either. I'm not saying they think Raijin is the best mid laner, bar none. This is just a pick that can fit any sort of composition, that can let you hold the rest of your draft until the second phase. I just think that Ra is a little bit too vulnerable. If you want to go him and not go a setup composition, it's a little bit too composition specific for something like the Ra. They're clearly trying to not play that exact same style that's brought them success. But when Radiance is going to let you, do it. I mean, we're still going to sit here on the desk and say, oh, we need to see something else from Obey. But the reality is we don't until they're forced to. I don't really think Radiance has forced them to do something different this game. I think they're choosing to.
It does seem that way, straying away from both parts of that key strategy for them that have been working these last few weeks. Now, for what it's worth, Obey sure looked good in Game 1, even without that core strategy, just not quite good enough to be able to close it out. Now, Radiance making a couple of adjustments here. They're going with this Cabrakan, which I would think is in the support role for Aurora. I believe we've seen him play this one before. Hercules had not been picked or banned up until this point either, so clearly just valuing this Cabrakan pick, and now trying to take a bit of an eye towards what Obey have, banning away the Sobek and the Nike. Obey say, we're taking away all the good hunters we can. Cupid and Ho Yi both stripped away. They already banned Freya. Olarin's off the table too, really trying to limit Cyclone Spin's pool here.
And that's exactly where Obey should be going, because Big Man's God pool is really, really big. Not that Cyclones isn't, but Big Man has just been very consistent on a lot of different picks. I don't think there's a mage that's really worth guaranteeing that he doesn't get. Hera's very strong, but if you ban the Hera, he can go to a bunch of different other things. So I think this is just fine. You leave yourself in a position now. The Sobek ban, I didn't even think about the Sobek for Radiance. I would have much preferred to see them take something like Sobek instead of Raijin in that exact same slot. Now Inbound has got to find a different god to be equally as impactful on, which should be pretty difficult, because I thought he was really, really impactful in Game 1.
Yeah, no Kuzenbo, no Sobek. Those are the picks he's looked great on, and this Amir is one of those picks he's not looked so great on. I think he's got some good early game starts, but eventually he just ends up behind and struggling on this pick. But I do think Sino getting the Nemesis is pretty worth talking about as well. I think a lot of people consider her still one of the strongest junglers out there, but she's fallen down pretty far here in this drafting phase. Is that just 7.9? Is that just where we are in Smite now, where Nemesis is not so much an instant top pick anymore, or do you think that Obey kind of got away with one?
Nem did take some nerfs coming into this patch. Remember, we're playing on 7.9 now, so that matters. That matters a lot when we're talking about this pick that Cyclone is hovering in that Artemis. I real quick before he locks that in, Nemesis, I think, has a very difficult matchup against Cabrakan. Cabrakan slow immune on the one, gets locked in by the walls, has 2 ways to cancel that shield. I don't love that matchup. And this is going to be our first look at this new Artemis, where she casts that 2, her attack speed stim. Not only does it give her movement speed now, but it also cleanses her of slows. And let's count the slows on Obey. Ram, Wukong, Raijin, Nemesis, Ymir. All 5. And It's a goddess that can lock down someone like Rom really, really well. This is a very positive matchup for Artemis because Rom's biggest strength a lot of times is going up into the air with that ultimate and then rolling away with iframes, because you could do that. Not when there's a trap underneath you. You just place a trap. There's a convenient little circle where Rom's going to land, and you put your trap on that, and you sit down and wait until he comes down, and you kill him for free afterwards. This Artemis pick is awesome for Cyclone. It is risky against something like Ymir, but Ymir is also risky on the other side. I cannot imagine this game going 53 here, Finch. Both of these compositions have snowball potential.
I think they do. This Artemis is scary, especially because, as we pointed out, Cyclone had a couple of positioning mistakes at game 1, and you gotta think that's only going to be exemplified on a pick like Artemis. But Cupid has the big team fight ultra. That's why he's so popular. So does Artemis with the boar. Excited to see some of these changes coming here in game number 2. Obey and Radiance. Let's go ahead and get it down to Dulcin.
Hey, Aggro, if game number 2 is as exciting as game 1 was, I'd be okay with another lengthy one here, but I tend to agree what we have built out here, maybe a little bit shorter. Granted, everything would seem shorter than 53 minutes. Still Dulcin, still Mifflin, still Doug here for game number 2 between Radiance and Obey. One that Radiance nearly ran away with Mifflin in the first 10 minutes, but Obey gritty to slow things down, but unfortunately unable to siege consistently, and Radiance take game number 1. I think an interesting point to kind of re-pick back up is where Aggro sort of dropped us off there, and it's the first time we'll be seeing this Artemis and maybe what we like in her into Obey's comp.
I mean, he nailed it all, man. All that slow immunity is going to come huge in a big way. And not only does he have a good matchup into Wowie on this ROM, but even Ymir is going to have a very hard time finding a time to lock down Cyclone Spin. He's trying to use the wall to set up. Cyclone Spin's going to have CC immunity on the ultimate as well as with beads. He can slow immune out of the ultimate from the Ymir as well, slow immune the Glacial Strike. It's just so much potential on an already volatile pick inside of Ymir that I think Inbound's going to struggle in this game. If he dies at all pre-5 minutes, this Ymir really doesn't have any comeback mechanics into this draft.
Right, and then kind of the answer, or the kind of counter question then is, you look at what Obey have drafted, how confident are you that they'll be able to consistently get in onto Cyclone Spin? We'll return to that in a moment. I want to see what happens with this little red buff invade. Inbound has reached level 2 here. There's some support from the rest of the squad. Half HP on the Ymir. Aurora body blocked by adapting here, unable to get in range, but they found the stun onto Sino nonetheless. An early bit of shielding used. Thus the shell popped. Inbound low as well. And an early look at 3 versus 3 out of the mid as both teams will disengage.
It was a nice attempt from Obey to try and move themselves into that red buff there. One of the strengths of Ymir is his ability to have just the most damage of any Guardian at that level 2, level 1 mark. So he wants to try and leverage that in the early as they move in towards the red buff, but they weren't quite able to do it. The counter rotation from Aurora, adapting, moving in, and putting in a ton of damage with the double hammer really dissuades Obey from continuing. And then Obey has to back up to their own jungle where they 3-split their red.
Oh, Ducky getting great damage in over onto Benji. Amaterasu has a tough one into Wukong, at least early on here. But kind of back to that point, I mean, we know that Cyclone Spin can disengage well from the slows that Obey is going to be building up here in this one. So I suppose that leads to concern, and maybe the big question is, I'm not sure who's going to be consistently getting in onto Cyclone Spin. Again, we'll have to return to it as Inbound being looked at here. Oh, the wall saves his life, and Wowie's there to body block the final auto. It's the rotation from adapting, and no first blood just yet.
That's a minuscule play from Inbound, but it definitely changes the face of it. Off of that suppress the insolent from Cyclone Spin to immediately find that slow. Inbound, if he doesn't use that wall perfectly, his life is forfeit. Adapting doesn't put a point into his wall at level 3. Instead, he goes for a second point into the third ability, Berserker's Barrage, meaning that there's really no more lockdown potential coming out from that Thor. Inbound has to fully turn around because he can't drop the wall at his feet like you normally see Ymirs do, due to that slow, due to the fact that he didn't have boots up just yet. So clean play from Ymir, but that's the best that I think we can expect to see from Inbound is clean disengages, potentially maybe some walls in the jungle. Cyclone Spin and Aurora won't be able to get over them, but it's just survivability and the ability to hang in there. It's going to be very hard for this Ymir to get proactive without the rest of his team to help him.
Right, I mean, it seems like Obey in game 1, without the 5,000 gold differential early, were maybe in a position to win that game, even able to be in a position to win the game for the large part of it. So this has got to be a big win for this team, not kind of walking face first into death over and over and over again. There has been some early pressure built up over in the long lane. You pointed out Ymir definitely good at buying some of that. Enough damage to sort of bring that forward. Sino on this Nemesis, I think, is going to be another fun one to follow. Definitely a lackluster performance on the Arachne in game number 1. Back to a pick now in the Nemesis, which is a little bit more tried and true.
I'm interested to see which direction Sino goes on this Nemesis. Picking up that Katana on that first item slot, we could see him immediately go into the Golden Blades, which should expedite a little bit of that farming process, but it is going to sacrifice a lot of the damage potential that he's going to have in the early game, instead of going for that ability focus build with the Crusher. Inbound taking a lot of pressure here. If Cyclone finds a trap, he might find a kill.
Not just yet. Instead, Sino has reached level 5, rooted down by Cyclone Spin here. Chase is on. Ultimate does not buy much damage. Mifflin, I am surprised that there was not all that much pressure, except for maybe 1 or 2 on this long lane in game number 1. Now Wowie is going to have to rotate away. Up to the skies he goes. Snipes down. First blood. Obey Alliance. Lock it in as Aurora is the one who goes down. Inbound as well. Uses the ultimate to slow down any re-engage. And Obey Alliance have found themselves the early win.
Just a weird re-engage. Adapting wasn't quite in range to find the dunk, but he still wants to commit himself. Does find a wall to separate the team fight just a little bit, force Wowie to reposition in the lane before using the rollout to disengage completely, but there really wasn't any follow-up there. Inbound dropping his ultimate in the middle of lane forces Artemis to back up. Cyclone Spin can't look for that trap under Wowie's ultimate like Aggro was highlighting on the desk, just because there wasn't any space to move in there. He would have lost out on his life. So there's a clean disengage from Obey, while Radiance just getting a little bit overzealous on their re-engage.
And, you know, kind of the secondary point to all of this is now we've seen nothing but action in the long lane side of the map. We did see some of that early skirmishing as well in game 1, but really jungle pressure has been put over onto the left-hand side of things here. Maybe make some sense, Mifflin, with the hunters paired with the supports that we see. Not the best disengaged necessarily. Wowie does have a little bit. But Cyclone Spin outside of that slow immunity, if you're jumped on, maybe it'll be difficult to disengage.
It would be, but both gods in the duo lane for Radiance have that slow immunity. We saw Nemesis came in with the ultimate. Immediately Aurora walks away. He doesn't get slowed. I mean, if he decided to hold Cyclone Spin, he's going to walk away. That man doesn't get slowed either. It seems like if I'm on Obey, if I'm Sino, I'm looking elsewhere on the map to put my pressure. Maybe BMT in mid is going to be a much easier target. Already playing an immobile mid-mage like Hera, this Nemesis would have a much easier time finding an engagement there. If we keep sending Sino over to duo, I'm sure Radiance is plenty happy to have Adapting rotate over and match that pressure, because they already have the winning team comp into that. They have the counter matchups. Radiance would love to fight in the long lane.
Well, with all of that being said, it's just the 1 kill, and Inbound has the 1 level lead over his counterpart in Aurora. Ducky continues to expand, though. 1 level lead out of that solo lane, and building into some more of that lifesteal that we saw Benji look for in game number 1. Not surprising at all when we know what the Sun Wukong brings to the table. I think it's always interesting to follow, though. This Ymir pick has been an Inbound favorite over recent weeks and has definitely brought some conversation around maybe where Ymir belongs. And I think I'm kind of undecided. We've seen the good, we've seen the bad out of the Ymir. He does some things very well, but easy to punish early.
Very easy to punish early. He's similar to Geb, he's similar to Khepri in that the early game is going to be the weakest portion of the game for this Ymir. If he receives any pressure, if he's left alone on an island, he's going to be able to pop off pretty hard. Ymir has some of the highest damage output of any Guardian in the early, but it's not all doom and gloom once we get to that 20-minute mark, once we get to that 5-on-5 engagement. Inbound on this Ymir has a bunch of really good wall targets, if not slow targets. I mean, Benji, BMT, Aurora, Cyclone Spin, none of them have any traditional leaps. They're going to have to just sit there once Ymir drops that wall inside the jungle, allowing for the rest of Obey to either close the gap or use their channeled abilities to deal damage. Wolfie should have an absolute field day if Inbound is able to find a nice wall. Oboe from Wowie in the late game is going to be able to completely separate these team fights. I think that this Ymir has a very high upswing. It could definitely be good, but the volatility of it, the low floors, the very low floors that Ymir has displayed in the past might be put on display here today, especially considering how much CC immunity and just straight up CC that Radiance have in their draft. If Inbound gets any focus on him, he could just fall.
We'll give him the benefit of the doubt early. Inbound has gotten the first blood in this one, granted some pressure from the rest of Obey, and maybe an overextension from Radiance is how we got there. Adapting on this Thor is always going to be fun to watch. A bit of a, miscalculated maybe ultimate to start off this game. And won't be in range immediately to help out with this. It's Sino putting a lot of pressure in onto Cyclone Spin. Tusky will stun down one, but Wowie there for the immediate follow-up. Talk about communication and execution from Obey. Sino realized he just needed to do enough and Wowie would hit the shots.
And it was a clean call as well. Wowie communicates that Sino's second ability is down, so that slow immunity wouldn't be there, allowing Sino to auto-cancel with his 3 a couple of times, find the Slice and Dice. Had the second ability been up from Artemis, that kill likely doesn't happen. Slice and Dice comes through, none of the auto attacks would have, and then Wowie finds those clean shots on the tail end, opening them up towards a Gold Fury. This is dangerous, adapting as ult.
Adapting, looking for the Anvil of Dawn. This is just going to be a warning flag to Obey that you need to think long and hard about whether or not you want to lock down or try to lock down the Gold Fury. And Obey will back themselves off. A much better start to this game from Sino on the Nemesis. You know, anything's going to be better than dying at the 000 mark in game number 1, but affecting both of the kills here up to this point. And again, you know, I was surprised, I think, as well as you, that Sino continues to return over to this long lane, but able to do burst damage is definitely one of the things that Nemesis can do. You drop the ult, you hit the clap, and then maybe an auto or two, and no amount of slow immunity is going to be able to save you from that much damage that quickly. So Sino absolutely sees something there. It's compounding on the lead that has sometimes been Obey's issue, but Mifflin, they've already pulled themselves 1,000 gold ahead, and Radiance is normally that team that can kind of keep pace despite some early stumbles. So this is looking great for Obey 10 minutes in.
It is, and it is going to be the stone-cutting sword coming through for Sino on the Nemesis, meaning that, sure, he's sacrificing a little bit of ability-based damage. Normally you would see a Crusher in this slot to not only feed into the auto-attack speed, but also into your ability damage and that additional penetration. It's going to be very hard to get huge value out of the passive from stone-cutting just because of all the slow immunity that they have, but maybe we'll see if it plays out.
Here comes Wolfie from the back line, and he's got the kill onto BMT. It's a double for the Raijin out of nowhere. Look at the collapse from Obey here. Ducky happily tanks up this tier 1 tower. Aurora, no blink, no chance. Wowie guns down his second of the game. Benji, dazzling offensive, stuns down 2, but he's only found death on the backside. Locked in by Inbound. Obey Alliance. They come into this one with a vengeance.
They do. Wolfie's going to be forced to retreat. The Artemis ultimate is still down. 4 members dead on the side of Radiance, and with a stone-cutting sword in the pocket of this Nemesis, Gold 3 should burn pretty quickly. Just take a peek at how much damage they're doing already. No one in range to defend. Obey's got a pretty commanding lead.
Wow, maybe the disengage of Obey is not what we should have been concerned about. Instead, Radiance is just being jumped on consistently here. It's Obey that are making these calls, making these plays, making Radiance have some sort of an answer, and there has not been one yet. A goose egg for everyone in the kill column, and then a 1 down the board, except for Aurora on this Kabrakan, who's been locked down a couple of times. Polar opposites from game number 1. Now Obey is in the driver's seat the same way Radiance was. And the onus was sort of on Obey in game 1 to really dig in those heals and slow things down. So this is a good test, I think, Mifflin. You've gotten yourself a great gold lead built up, about equal to what game 1 was, but countered, you've got it now if you're Obey. This game is in your hands this early on against Radiance. Let's see what they can do with it.
I'm expecting to see Inbound try and put a ton of pressure into that mid lane, trying to exploit the fact that this Hera is largely immobile. We've already got about a level and a half lead in favor of the mid laner for Obey. Wolfie deciding to move himself into that defensive path, meaning that he is going to sacrifice a little bit of damage, but his ability to stick around in these team fights to use that jump aggressively is going to skyrocket. And when you've got an XP lead, building into defense is a slightly better option just because you're going to have the damage output from leveling up your abilities anyway. Wolfie should be able to outscale the damage that we see from BMT despite that difference in builds.
Sino is going to make his way over to the long lane yet again. He's dropped down the ultimate here. Polymorph connects, but Sino, he does not care. He is simply walking towards Big Man Tings. Does not have the damage, but wow, he sure does. We've seen that one already, and it works out yet again. Cyclone Spin beneath this tier 1 tower. Aurora, opposite side, tier 2, Inbound, unable to connect, but he wants to keep going. Fantastic wall blocks Aurora right in place. That buys time for Ducky to cycle around the backside. A 2 for none, and Obey They're already sieging down this tier 1 in the left.
It's gonna go down for free. No one's defending that one, but a tower this early on in the duo lane means that Cyclone now has the opportunity to freeze the lane at the tier 2, but they look like they're not done. They want the tier 2 as well.
Oh my god, Mifflin, this is horrific for Radiance, to say the least. Obey Alliance are decimating their side of the map here. Adapting goes in, has to use the beads, but Ducky will put down the Thor once more. Benji, dazzling offensive, no stunts here. You gotta get the kill onto Wolfie, and he's able to do at least that. Ducky, tanky enough, is gonna slow down any further re-engage from Radiance. Tier 1, tier 2 in left, tier 1 falls to minions in right, and a kill to trade out. Obey Alliance are playing lights out.
5,000 gold, 5,000 experience, and the pressure is on. Radiance don't have any towers left in that long lane. It's looking tough. I mean, 9 and 1 is the slash line, and Ducky, you got it. Cyclone's dead here.
Whoa.
Coming here.
Oh my goodness, Sun Wukong apparently pretty good, huh, Mifflin? Now's maybe the time you can jump on that soapbox. We have seen the rise of the Sun Wukong over the last few weeks, and Ducky is showing us why exactly here. The ability to walk in and do big damage cannot be understated.
You know what? Any opportunity you give me to hop on a soapbox, Dave, I'm gonna take it every single day.
All right, tell me why
I'm
so great, Miff. Go ahead.
We'll talk about Sun Wukong. Maybe you're talking about Sun Wukong. Ducky on this Sun Wukong is great, not only in of itself as a pick, but into this draft, it's going to be incredibly strong. Cyclone Spin really only has the additional movement speed from Vengeful Assault to get him out of these sticky situations, meaning that if Ducky closes the gap, sure, you got slow immunity, doesn't matter. He's got a full second stun on the cat form, the damage output, and the Somersault Cloud is going to have huge chase down potential. Being level 16, Ducky really doesn't have to go back to lane anytime soon. If he wants to, he can continually put the pressure onto that duo lane matchup. This Artemis at 4 levels down on the enemy Soul Laner won't be able to fight in ever, and with Soul Eater already fully stacked and going into some more bruiser items, Ducky's sacrificing tankiness for a little bit of extra damage output. With this huge lead, fantastic choice. Now, not only is Artemis going to be under duress, but as is Hera. There's so many people that are going to be afraid of the Soul Laner from Obey.
Oh, the blink in from Aurora might punish Sino for overextending here. It's Big Man Tings who will get the kill, but Ducky is going to do massive damage to Adapting, who has to retreat from the fight. Benji caught in here with Wolfie, or maybe Wolfie is caught in there with Yamaterasu. Ducky will finally make his way out from Aurora's ultimate. Maybe the best chance Radiance has at some sort of refight, some sort of re-engagement. But Obey Alliance are going to retreat nonetheless. Up until that small engagement there where Big Man Ting's got a kill, inbound, and now ticks right back over. Inbound is a level ahead or equal to 4 out of 5 members of Radiance here, just to kind of put in context where this game stands. This Ymir is absolutely swinging along with the rest of Obey. It's going to be a long, difficult road for Radiance if they want to slow things down, because even in Game 1, Myth, when Obey showed us that when behind, it won't necessarily slow down their mindset, though it did a little bit when they kind of stalled out the game there. But it did show that they're willing to take the fights sort of to compound on what they've built here. So Radiance, they really got to think twice about where they're positioning themselves.
And to compound your point, exactly right there, Cyclone Spin moves up a little bit too far. There's no safety inside a tier 1 or tier 2, so he's got to back up all the way to his Phoenix/back camps if he wants to farm safely. So Inbound just walks over, uses his freeze to trade out that ultimate, and now another objective is going to go the way of Obey. Gold Fury, Oni Fury, falls down for free, which is going to open them up to pushing down some towers. We've already seen that Obey is willing to group up as 5 and take on an engagement right now. With the advent of these Oni minion waves, that mid tower that's already half health is going to be under a lot of pressure from Obey.
It's maybe the most lopsided we've seen a game against Radiance in recent memory. Benji has been able to find some pressure sort of alone when everyone else from Obey has left over in the solo lane, knocked down the tier 1 tower there. Very low is the mid lane tower as well. If there is a silver lining here, Big Man Tings on this Hera, we have seen how difficult it is sometimes to kill off the Hera, the shielding and the massive damage, the disengage even, a little knock-up from the Argus, enough to save your life sometimes. So definitely something I think Obey have to consider as far as engaging on BMT in the future.
Take a peek at the relics from a Radiance, Dave. We've already seen now that Aurora has to put a ton of respect onto these walls that Inbound's able to bring because of the lack of mobility from Radiance. So it's going to be a Phantom picked up. Going to help out a lot in these jungle fights, but it's really going to come down to that 15% damage mitigation that you get from it. It's going to be hugely impactful. It puts a timer on your engagements, though. That it's not a very long buff that you get. You're going to have to fight around it.
This is maybe the best that Cyclone Spin can do here. Let's knock down the towers on the left-hand side and hope that my team can survive on the opposite end. Unfortunately, the tier 2 tower in the solo lane will not stand. So Cyclone Spin, I guess all things considered, Mifflin, it's maybe a win there for Radiance, though equal as far as towers that fall, though the tier 1 fell in the left lane as well. Bay Alliance might need to get something here.
They might, but even then, 18 minutes in with the gold lead that they have, they don't have to feel like they're under too much pressure here. They do decide to send Ducky back to base so he can defend out that left side Phoenix, teleport back into the fight. They do decide to look for that Fire Giant. And right there, we saw immediately what the composition of Radiance is able to do to stop the pressure from Obey. Cyno immediately tries to drop his ultimate onto Aurora, who just uses his one and walks away. No slow means that there's no chase down potential for this Nemesis. Cyno's got to be very choosy with his ultimates when he wants to do it, who he wants to do them on, if he's looking to get value out of them. But as of right now, Obey's still in the driver's seat. They could very easily look towards that mid tower, try and force it down since it's so low, potentially take a fight if Radiance decide to defend it. And 19 minutes in, Fire Giant's not out of the question.
You haven't seen Cyno flex his build recently as of yet. He's got Kin Size and that Winged Blade online since really the last time we started to see them skirmish. So this Nemesis, especially in this auto-attack-centric build, and maybe you pick up the Wing Blade so you can more consistently get into the backline and land some of those autos. It's going to be a force to be reckoned with, and Radiant seem to agree. They'll just back off, let this tier 1 tower fall.
Notice how conflicted verse Radiance is right now. They're not looking for any fight engagements because they haven't had Cyclones been grouped up with them ever. But Cyclone, sitting inside that long lane the entire time, has closed the level gap and in fact given him a level lead. He's going to be huge in this team fight.
Inbound freezes down onto Benji. Dazzling offensive. Will not find the stun onto Ducky. He was channeling the Somersault Cloud. Solo lane ult for solo lane ult traded out here. Net win maybe for both sides, but Dazzling offensive is usually massive as far as engaging in onto a fight. It's a double polymorph into a double Argus from BMT to slow down Obey's engage. Wowie just one snipe short of getting the kill onto Aurora, and that might be just enough to delay the Fire Giant. Instead, it will be the Pyromancer called out for Obey.
That's a smart call. Even though they do get the TKO on Aurora, forcing him back to base, the rest of Radiance is still looking pretty healthy. Had Obey decided to look towards the Fire Giant there, with Cyno already being 50% health, they might have just lost.
Cyclone Spin is going to try to do as much damage as he can. Adapting with the double tap from range is the one who gets the kill onto Inbound. 1 for 1. Inbound has to use his actives as well. But Cyclone Spin down for a Ymir. Sorry, Inbound, but seems like it's a little bit more worthwhile for Obey.
Yeah, supports can die. I don't want anything I said in that last game to impact how the chat or anyone else thinks I feel about it. Yeah. Support trading out for a carry every single day of the week. That's value. Support trading out for a beads in the late game, maybe a little bit less so, but Inbound does a very good job separating that team fight with his wall, immediately isolating Cyclone Spin, allowing for the rest of Obey to move up safely without having to worry about return damage. But it's a small trade that gets him the Pyromancer, a couple kills swing the way of Obey. And now we're looking at about a 6,000 gold lead-ish in favor of Obey, 5,000 rather. Don't do math on cast. Now we need to see them really try and separate themselves. Gold Tree is likely going to be the next objective that they look towards, just because it's going to be a little bit easier for them to group up on. But this Fire Giant needs to go down soon, because Radiance's 5-on-5 engagement, once they do get those Automas online, once they do hit level 20, is very strong, and it might have some decent counter matchup with Obey just to swing the game back in their favor. Obey needs to play around the lead that they already have.
And they're trying to do that now around this Primal period. Oracles are there for Radiance. 5 versus 5 fight may be looming over the horizon. Inbound Ducky, first through the door on the back line of the fight. Now Aurora is being looked at, walled in. Has to walk his way around the right-hand side. It's the Phantom Pop. Will it save his life? Seems to be this time, but Ducky says otherwise. Down he lands, and down goes Aurora. The snipes just shy of killing off Cyclone Spin.
Adapting.
Up to the sky. Goes adapting. Where will he land? Lots of grouped up targets. It's a 3-man stun, but there's no follow-up from Radiance. And adapting has to get out alive. Benji lurks around the side. It's the Fury being looked at once more. though Obey are playing it slow.
He still has the dazzling offensive, but the disengage potential of the wall is huge there. If Benji just gets a little bit overzealous with it, Inbound can immediately separate it from the entirety of the team fight. So Benji's going to have to play very smart. It's more the threat of his presence than it is anything else. Inbound uses the wall now. Dazzling offensive could be huge.
Benji walking his way in. Silence onto Wowie. Answered back with the shell here. Dazzling offensive is going to get the stun down, but a well-timed Aegis keeps Wowie alive. Benji unable to sidestep the execute damage. Sino grabs the kill, and once again, Primal Fury being looked at. Radiance, like waves crashing into this Fury Pit. Gonna maybe try to slow things down once more, but look at this from Inbound. He does not care. He walks himself in, eats the Argus in the back line. The Fury gets locked in. Inbound tags the wall down, but the stun onto Aurora cancels out the channel, and Inbound walks out alive. Aurora might not be able to say the same for him as Wolfie grabs the kill. Cyclone Spin falls as well. Obey Alliance, massive fight in the Fury Pit.
Man, Radiance, you said they're like waves crashing in, more like lambs to the cosmic slaughter, kind of walk into that Gold Fury engagement one by one. Aurora just goes in alone, immediately gets separated, tries to find the last hit on the Inbound, wasn't quite able to do it. The disengage is clean, and now we're looking at 20 seconds left on Aurora respawn, 30 seconds left on Cyclone Spin. Obey should be barreling down towards this Fire Giant, and there's not much of a defense potential at all. Radiance, no ultimate available on BMT, no ultimate available on adapting. There's no way for them to close the gap. Inbound doing a good job of establishing ward dominance. Good luck, Radiance. This is going to be a Fire Giant going the way of Obey, and 2 Phoenixes already exposed.
I mean, at that point, we're selling out for a Ymir, and you know, we've already sort of mentioned how that looks. Inbound does his job there and staying alive, but best case scenario is you get the kill on the Ymir and then you trade out your life, I suppose. But in the grand scheme of things, all that does is spark the engagement that's going to then give the free Fire Giant 25 minutes over to Obey Alliance. Open Phoenixes on the left and right hand side, just the tier 2 tower in mid. As far as the exposed bases go, I mean, about as bad as it gets. -1 tower, +1 tower, I suppose, for Radiance out of the mid lane. You're going to need your base defense to be feeling comfortable against what Obey are bringing.
And they do have a decent base defense, Radiance that is. Benji with the dazzling offensive obviously has one of the best engage tools in the game. Could take the fight outside the Phoenix if they so choose, or if anyone steps up too far, find a stun, set up for the damage output. Obviously the engage potential from this Thor with the Anvil of Dawn is going to be huge as well. But I'm worried about how well BMT and Cyclone Spin are going to be able to perform. We've already seen that the dive potential from Obey has been crippling. Ducky constantly in the backline, inbound, dropping huge walls, forcing the Phantoms early on in the engagement, then disengaging and going back in. Aurora's going to have to be very choosy and try and actually identify when Obey is fully committing themselves instead of dropping that Phantom a little bit too early on. That 15% damage mitigation is going to be hugely impactful to try and close up this gold lead that Obey have established for themselves. The dive potential is there, but the siege defense is as well. I think I favor Obey just because this lead seems so insurmountable.
I mean, Aurora's had an absolutely brutal game number 2. We'll see if maybe he can help out. And Radiance turning things around here. Look at the damage that's gone on to Cyclone Spin. That is free for Obey Alliance here, and it gets worse. Suddenly you're losing a fight in the back of your base. Obey Alliance still the utility to move back in, adapting. No good on the ultimate. BMT, Benji, you gotta defend the base here. Argus still doing some damage onto Ducky. Sino's gonna try to whittle that one away. Radiance, only 2 members left alive. Obey Alliance looking for the finish here. Benji walking his way out. Big man Ting's gonna need to be big on the polymorph here, and down goes Argus. Suddenly, a big piece of defensive utility is missing here. Obey, they walk their way into the Titan. Big man Tings, he cannot move any further out. Benji hanging around to the backside. Obey Alliance quite low here, so Radiance doing their job for the moment, but half HP suddenly on the Titan. Obey Alliance, regroup, re-engage, down goes the Titan, and we're headed to a game 3.
That is a new Obey. When I voted for Obey, I wasn't expecting that level of play. These guys are looking a lot better. Not only do they fight into a lead in game 1 that Radiance established for themselves 6,000 gold at 18 minutes in favor of Radiance, and they take them to the 53-minute mark, but this time Obey get a small lead in the early game, about 3,000 at that 13-minute mark, and snowball it constantly. First one's to the objectives, first one to the Pyromancer, constantly forcing fights, taking down a tier 2 tower at the 13-minute mark as well. This Obey is looking concentrated, they're focused, and they want some wins.
If you told me that game 2 is going to be almost literally half the amount of time as game 1, honestly, my chips would have been on Radiance, you know? I mean, that's just that's the way this phase has flowed. But it's time, I think, to start putting more stock in this Obey team. They decimate Radiance here in game number 2. A chance to get a big win over a top 4 team right after this break.
Nothing at all. Hide your tracks beneath the rind of a different frame of mind. Is that what you heard? Broken words in the dirt, yelling up into the sun. Here we come, here we come. Here we come, here we come. Here we come, here we come. You can lift your head up to the sky. Take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path among the lines with your shattered frame of mind. This time you could always stay. We can wait right here and play until somehow you can find a slightly better frame of mind. You can lift your head up to the sky. Take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path along the lines with your shattered frame of mind. This time you could always stay. We can wait right here and play until somehow you can find a slightly better frame of mind. And when the light comes through, when the day isn't new, then it will be time for a new frame of mind. When all eyes are on you.
Well, a quick 27-minute game where one team was in control from the beginning, so that means Radiance got the 2-0, clean our hands, and we'll move on. No, actually, it was Obey that stopped Radiance. It was not close. You have to believe me when I tell you, if you did not watch this one, not much in question at all how this one would eventually end for Obey as they force us into a game number 3 in aggro. I mean, the only thing I can say about that game is that it definitely was Smite. What happened there, bud? How did this one get so out of control?
It was really Sino just moving all across the map. He was in left, he was in mid, inbound was with him. They were just kind of death-balling really, really effectively in this game. And I think that's a great way to catch Radiance when they aren't really set. A lot of times Radiance likes to do the conveyor belt method of Aurora goes in, gets a whole lot of ults, and then goes out, whether by choice or not. And then it was adapting going in. Same sort of thing. Then Big Man, then Benji. And they just couldn't ever really get on that same page. Sino and Wowie really combined really well. This play impressed me quite a bit, where Sino knows he only has to do a little bit of damage. Wowie right there with the follow-up snipes, no doubt about that one. Wolfie was being really aggressive in this game. I mean, this is a psychotic jump in a lot of team fights. And it's just good trust by the team. It's a good call by the whole unit. And Wolfie's there to put out that damage set up by Inbound and by Sino. This team's working, man. The way that this team has bought in to how they want to play this game, they're on a much more cohesive page than Radiance is right now. And that'll make up for a lot of differences in experience and in success and in how long you've been playing at this level. Being on the same page will do an awful lot for you.
And certainly Obey are a really strong game number 2 here from the Obey boys, and a lot to build on. Now, I would make the argument at this point that in this set, Obey has played cumulatively more good Smite than Radiance has so far. That doesn't mean Radiance can't turn this all around in game 3 and we're out of here in a hurry. But I don't know, it just based on the hotter hand, I think I might be leaning a bit towards Obey. They're playing really well, they're trusting each other, as you said, and Radiance just seemed a bit out of sorts to me. This Cabrakan did not seem to get a whole lot done as far as I could tell, to the point where he felt forced to get this Phantom into Inbound's wall, and that was causing too much problems for them. Cyclone Spin's Artemis experiment has also come up a failure, I would say. Not really much of anything worked for Radiance in that game number 2, so I suppose they can at least throw it all away, go to the drawing board, and start again, because this comp was not it, at least not in game number 2.
I mean, the one duo lane went 0-11, and it was not Obey. it was Radiance. So that tells a pretty good story. Wowie with that first pick, Rom, I was saying I don't know how much I love it. Clearly they knew what they were doing, because he made it work on this pick really effectively. I'm sure Rathan tweeted his thing about not picking Ymir at the SPL level. Someone should be retweeting that right now, because Inbound looked phenomenal on it in this game. It's one of the few times where the Ymir has worked out in Rathan's defense, but it certainly did here.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised too, but you're right. It did work for them. They were playing aggressively around it from minute 1, using the wall well, getting great value out of the freezes as well. If Inbound can keep playing it like that, then that's the Ymir we need to see for him. Let's go ahead and get into the picks and bans now for game number 3. I don't know if I would have thought even 3 weeks ago that this could be a game 3 type of set, but so far, Obey are making me think that it absolutely should be. Really could make an argument it might even have been a 2-0 with how much they were in control of that first game for about 20 minutes there from the mid to late game. So they're the ones coming in with all the momentum.
Agreed. Radiance is kind of playing with house money right now. That they have a game 3 to go to with how game 1 was going for the vast majority of the mid to late game. So they've got to try and make the most out of this opportunity. Remember, only 1 loss for Radiance so far in this phase. Now, They haven't played the last 2 weeks, but still only 1 loss. Take your second loss here against an Obey Alliance team. That would be a pretty big story coming out of Friday. And we haven't even gotten to seeing New Looky United quite yet.
That's right. I don't even, losing to Obey here is tough, because you don't get to just get a freebie on E United anymore, man. There's a lot of tough sets that are going to be coming up, so you need to get every single dub where you can. If you're any of these teams in the SPL right now, kind of look over your shoulder, because nothing is safe. So far, though, these picks and bans are fairly safe. A lot of the same stuff we've seen banned all set. The Tsukiyomi, the Yamoja, the Persephone, the Kuzenbo. We are starting to move into an area, though, where some of the target bans might come out, and hello, this Ram here is an excellent example. Perhaps they, like you, are becoming more of believers in this Wowie Rom.
Have to be, the way he's played it these last 2 games. He's been an impact player in both of these games. Now you, again, leave open a whole lot of stuff. You can go Ola Run once again. Remember, Radiance banned that themselves in game number 2. That tells me they probably think it's really, really good, or they wanted to switch up their playstyle entirely. If it's the latter, you can go Ama in this spot, but if it's the former, you're going to take it number 1, and that's what they end up doing.
And I like this. Cyclone Spin looked so much better in Game 1 than he did in Game 2, where the Artemis was a non-factor. That's not even quite fair. Certainly a factor, just a detriment to Radiance's chances of winning the second game at the very least. This Olarum, though, is where he was able to get some of those sanctified fields that were keeping them in the game. But here's another note. Sun Wukong has been on both winning teams now. Benji in Game 1 pulled them back from the brink, and in Game 2, Ducky dominated from the beginning. Somewhere, Mifflin is laughing mischievously, as this Sun Wukong might be the difference maker in this set.
It makes sense. I mean, it's won both games. It's looked really, really strong in both games. I like it. And I like what Obey does here. You go Wukong Cupid, even though Radiance likely isn't going to take Cupid. If you wanted to get something else in this slot, you could have. You're giving up Ama to Radiance with this Wukong pick, but that's what they did last game, and it worked out pretty well, so you can't really fault them for that. I just think they likely could have picked something besides Cupid here, because you know Radiance is going to put Olarun there for Cyclone Spin. But actually, I stand corrected. We've seen Big Man Tings play that Cupid mid, so it actually does make a lot of sense that Obey prioritize it early, make sure Radiance don't get to snatch both, and grabbing Wukong Cupid, it ends up being the better call.
And I like this adjustment as well. I think no surprise that Ama gets taken here, but this Hercules, I believe, wasn't banned in Game 2. I think Aurora just went Kabrak in a different direction. I'm sure you can let me know if I'm wrong on that one, but go back to this Hercules, right? This is what Aurora does, right? This is signature pick, at least in my mind, in terms of thing that Aurora gets the most consistent value out of. So now this Hercules is back. The aggression in the early game is back. The thing that got Sino before the minion spawned in Game 1 is back, and perhaps this can get Radiance back on track.
I love the way Hercules was really a factor in Game 1 early, but late game I felt like Aurora really had struggles staying relevant. So Radiance has got to pick some things that can snowball off of pressure from Aurora, because he did enough. The way that he played the early game in Game 1 should have been enough to win. It shouldn't have mattered what else happened in that game come late game. So in my mind, if I'm Radiance, I want to pick something early for Big Man Tings. I want to pick something early for adapting that they can start to get some of that pressure and really snowball onto some of these objectives. And for that reason, I really like this Robin ban by Obey, because that's the exact type of pick that I would have wanted to see Adapting take.
Certainly would allowed him to be in control from the beginning of the game. Now take a look at this for Radiance. They are completely adapting now mid-set, banning away the ROM, banning away the Raijin, giving respect over to Wowie and Wolfie. Not a backline combination that I think you normally are worried about in your ban phase, but I think Radiance recognizing, especially with the picks already in, that they do need to put some respect in that direction. Don't allow them just continuously all 3 games play the picks they're comfortable on, force them to make some adjustments, take another shot at Sino in the jungle, and see if that can help you out here in this 3rd game, because they've already got the Amir back that inbound looked good on. They got a ton of picks that are comfort picks for Obey.
But already, you look at what Obey can pick. Erlong Ra, open, and looking pretty decent here in my mind.
Oh, there we
match
go.
up with Ra. And what is Radiance going to do? Is Adapting going to play the Erlong Shen? I don't think Adapting really played a lot of Erlong, even when he was mega broken back in the day. That just doesn't feel like an Adapting pick to me. I'd much more expect to see Adapting go the way of something like Da Ji or the Hebo could be him, but I imagine that's more for big man. I'm thinking Thor, that sort of pick, more for Adapting traditionally at the very least in that jungle. I love what Obey has done. They've opened themselves up to getting one of their signature combos.
And inbound is on one of his favorite picks in this Amir. We know how strong Cupid and Sun Wukong are, just as meta picks. This makes a lot of sense to me if the Erlong gets locked in, and it has me a bit scared for Radiance coming into this game 3. Now, I don't want to get too ahead of myself. Hebo Thor is a very scary mid lane combination. Much scarier, I think, than Erlong and Ra. I don't know how Ra gets away from either one of these 2 picks. So maybe Tings and Adapting get something going from here in the early game before this Erlong Ra combo get off the ground. Which one between the mid jungle combos are you favor?
It's really, if Sino can get a lead, he can run this game, because he's got so many positive matchups against Hebo and against Olaran. Both of those characters just die to pin if they don't have their beads up. Now, Hebo at least can ult out. Olaran really can't respect that at all. If Sino falls behind, he is worthless this game because of the knockups from Olaran, from Hebo, the CC from Thor and Hercules. This game, as most games do, especially for Obey, is going to ride on the jungler, because Sino has been a driving force. Game 1, he gets taken out of it early. Radiance win early game pretty convincingly. Game 2, Sino's the one dictating the pace. Even against a semi-global in the Thor, was the one setting the pace of these team fights in Obey Stomp. If he can do the same on the Erlong, I think we're looking at an Obey victory.
This isn't just a game 3. This is a game 3 that's basically a toss-up. Radiance and Obey a matchup way better than anyone expected. Let's get it started.
Obey Alliance looking to get things started here as well, Finch. A 5-man rotation to start off this one. Over in to the Radiant side of the map. Only Ducky lurking close by, but luckily far enough back to sense out Obey being just over the wall there. So no fights to be found early. Still Dolson, still Mifflin, still Doug for the final game between Radiance and Obey. And Mifflin, if you cover up the teams at the top, you know, you're thinking any SPL team would be happy to draft what Radiant have, but this draft is Obey, right? For the Obey team, this is what they draft, this is what they win with, and they're going against a lot of great picks for Radiance.
You hit the nail on the head, Dave. This is Obey playing Obey's own individual meta against the SPL meta that Radiance is bringing. Just the individual picks that Radiance have are almost all best in class across the board. They got away with Aurora's Hercules. They've got Olaran running it back on Cyclone Spin, who had a fantastic game on it in Game 1, adapting on one of his signature picks inside of Thor, a Hebois just in general on your team. Whereas Obey decided to go a little bit more towards what they're comfortable with, inbound of the Ymir. Not exactly a top pick, top fan god, but it has been working out for him in the past. Wolfie on Ra, Sino on Erlang. I was wondering when we get to see this look from Obey again, especially considering Ra got a recent buff in 7.9. Now he's got slow immunity on the second ability.
Well, these red buff invades have been non-stop throughout this set so far. Radiant's looking for more of the same here. Will end up falling down. Wolfie locks that one in. One of the things that Dex pointed out, Mifflin, and I tend to agree with, is Sino's got a lot of weight to carry, I think, here in this one. And if you're looking at his history, the last 2 times he played Erlong Shen, he won a combined 9, 0, and 20. So he has not died on this pick in the last 2 games at least. In the future, maybe a little bit more, but this is what he does. He starts off these games aggressively, follows up with the damage from Wolfie, the double tap from adapting. That's going to slow down the engagement, and BMT finds the knockup. And luckily with his life, BMT walks away, but Sino is looking to get damage in early and often.
He gets the damage in and he takes away the beads from BMT. Unfortunate that Wolfie wasn't quite able to connect the first ability there. That would have resulted in a first blood, but that's still a ton of pressure that Obey are finding, and it's a good start for them to make sure that they get the lead for themselves. Sino now pulling a level ahead, adapting, just narrowly escapes the slow from Wolfie. He gets tapped there. He might have lost his life considering he tried to use that hammer to steal away those mid camps. Obey's doing a good job finding pressure across the map, and it's looking pretty good for them, but Sino's going to have to keep this up. He can't slow down now. You might want to look to kill BMT while those beads are still down.
Right, just slowly and slightly outpacing adapting up to this point. So good start, at least in the micro game from Sino. Inbound as well on this Ymir. I mean, everyone is always going to have questions. Not even for inbound, but just for the Ymir pick in general. And I think it looked great in game number 2. Now he's got a large task. It's not the 0506 Kabrakan from Aurora that you're going up against. It's Aurora back on the Hercules, Cyclone Spin, back on the Olaron. The Kabrakan Artemis sort of experiment is over. So this is maybe a more telling sign of inbound on this Ymir, going up against Aurora and Cyclone on a couple of their favorite picks.
But Ymir also has a deceptively kind of cheeky good matchup into Hercules. If Hercules tries to pull anyone that isn't the Ymir, the wall can put a stop to it. Not only blocking the driving strike, but if he chooses to, just separating the Hercules from the rest of his team. And Wolfie just getting the better end of BMT in mid, finding the trades, using the sustain as well. BMT's going to have to go back to base here. He's completely He's going to miss out on a lot of minions if Wolfie decides to freeze the wave.
Had the extra 1 tier of boots there, maybe what makes the large difference in that trade. Now BMT's going to go back and tier up his boots. Look at this. The immediate answer from Sino is to wrap around the backside. He has his ultimate. I wonder how adapting paths this one out. Who's doing the mid harpies here. He's going to use his hammer. He's just peeking around the corner. Sino is awaiting the mid laner to return, but adapting senses out the Erlang Shen's presence. An interesting game of chess here. Sino, I don't think, realizes he's been spotted, is still hanging in there off to the side. Will now finally disengage, not wasting too much time.
Yeah, there wasn't much that Sino could really do there anyway. He was still getting the farm from mid, just hanging near that wave. There wasn't really any buffs up available for him. He could have tried to contest those right side mid camps had he spotted out adapting there. But instead, hanging out for a little bit, waiting for your right time to spring your trap and see if you can catch out BMT. Not too questionable to play, especially considering he already had about a half level, 3/4 of a level lead over adapting in the jungle. When you've got a lead like that, you can afford a little bit of time to trying to set up for a kill, trying to make sure one of these lanes succeeds. So I like the patience from Sino and the relative safety. He doesn't overcommit himself, and once he sees Aurora's rotated in, the threat of getting pulled in the tower is a little bit too high, so he goes back to farming safely in the jungle.
And you know, Mifflin, I'm glad we got a little look over there at Ducky as well. I think Ducky has had a phenomenal day today here out of this solo lane. It's always a large, tall task to fight up against Benji, one of the best and more aggressive solo laners here in this league. But, you know, the Sun Wukong versus Amaterasu matchup is one that has worked out for Ducky's, you know, maybe a half level behind here as the wave pushes right back in towards him. But I think Ducky, you know, should be commended and probably is thankful, or not thankful, but happy with the way his day has gone. Adapting will dunk down, first attempted Anvil of Dawn of the game. He's going to get the beads out of Wolfie here, and, you know, to kind of flip the conversation over to the mid lane. That's definitely some of the concerns maybe around this Ra, the ability to be jumped on.
He's got to play incredibly safe now. We've seen now what Adapting's able to do. If he finds the dunk, it's going to burn the beads every single time. With the beads being down now, he's going to be under a lot of kill pressure. There's a lot of follow-up potential as well. But I want to highlight the fact that Aurora's been constantly looking for pressure, been looking for ganks, and he's starting to fall behind a little bit EXP-wise. Now, inbound about a half level up as well. And a lot of these pools Aurora been looking for has been towards this Ymir. If he does find a pull on the Ymir, follow it up with a driving strike, put him out of position, it's going to be very hard for an immobile Guardian like Ymir to escape that situation, especially with all the damage follow-up that Radiance has on their team comp. I mean, just a crushing wave would likely be enough to finish it off, but inbound's been positioning masterfully around it, has not been connected with a pluck just yet.
Obey are saying it's time for the 3v3 as Sino Wolfie and Inbound will combine for a small invade. Just going to take away some of the Harpies from Adapting, but Adapting is looking elsewhere instead. It's the gank onto Wowie. Beautiful stun there. Fields of Love will not be enough, and Cyclone Spin back on the Oleron, back in the first blood column.
Looking good for the Oleron. That's not how that lane's supposed to go. Again, magical ADCs get outscaled in the early game despite what we've seen from Radiance so far this set, but it just seems like Cyclone Spin's so comfortable in what he's able to do on Oleron, chooses the right time to engage, knowing that Adapting's hovering around the jungle. Adapting somehow perfectly lines up his wall to connect the stun despite the time dilation from Sanctified Fields slowing down the dash from the Cupid. It's just clean mechanical plays across the board, but so far, Obey hasn't really grouped up. They haven't really tried to fight into it too much just yet, and we're looking at about a 500 gold differential.
Oh no, Sino has to disengage here from Adapting, but the chase is on now. The knockback from Aurora, luckily, the pull was just enough in range to get the kill onto Sino, so now Radiance has a couple of kills in pocket. One on Cyclone, one on Aurora, and now this Hercules has found some value 7.5 minutes into the game.
Interesting that Sino decides to hold on to the 9 turns blessing there. I guess he realizes that with Aurora hovering in the wings, with his blink being available, there's not really much opportunity for him to buy the time to get that heal for himself. But the positioning as well, he doesn't run towards his own team. Instead, he's forced to move into the enemy jungle. There's really no situation where that Erlang Shen's going to get out of that scenario. But he does do a lot to buy time. He takes away Adapting's beads. He burns off the blink from this Hercules. So the engage potential for Radiance is going to be much lower for the next couple of seconds.
Adapting wants to go anyway. There's the double tap. Excavate crushes down onto Wolfie and nearly got the kill. Radiant happy with the way the early game has gone here. It is all run through Adapting and whoever else happens to be in the lane there, affecting all 3 of the kills. And with that one gets on the board, and Mifflin pulls 2 levels ahead of Sino. And Sino is the one doing a lot of the early pressuring. Adapting has found that well-placed aggression now 3 times in this game.
Man, this is not where you want to see the Erlang Shen performing if you're an Obey fan. Now Sino's got a steep hill to climb back up, and it's going to be completely reliant on how well he's able to synergize around this Ra. So far, we haven't seen that signature Obey combo of pin into turtle form, knock up into a Ra ult for an instant kill. It just hasn't happened yet. Radiance is doing a very good job dedicating a ton of their resources to the 3v3 in mid just to dissuade Obey from looking for that engagement, buying a lot of time for BMT to continually farm up. And I'll say, come 25-30 minutes, Radiance should outscale the majority of what Obey is bringing. They've got 2 late-game win conditions named Hebo and Oleron, and they've been left largely uncontested.
Benji is looking for a blue buff invade here, and then a little extra damage onto Sino. That's a 1-level lead on the Amaterasu, and the threat of an Anvil of Dawn from Adapting is enough to slow down Obey Alliance from re-engaging in on that fight. So a blue buff locked down for Obey, a small win there, but maybe shows you where the confidence level stands of Benji here. You know, enough of talking about Ducky up to this point. Benji is ready to make his mark as well. Small counter rotation over towards this red buff side. Wolfie definitely good at locking down some healing for his team. Aurora catches the 9 turns blessing in here from Sino. The excavate, I think that catches onto 3, and Sino turns it around, grabs the kill. Down goes Aurora as well. Wowie is rotated in. Fields of Love.
Huge damage.
That locks Cyclone Spin in space and picks up the kill. BMT, crushing wave, did some work there as well. It's a 2-for-1. Obey slightly ahead.
Obey do come out ahead there, and that's a fight that Radiance was looking for themselves. That 2,000, nearly 3,000 gold lead gets immediately cut. We're just about completely even, only about 1,000 gold separating these 2 teams. The XP deficit is cut as well, only 800. Obey take 1 fight and play it perfectly, and not only do they win out on the engagement, but now Cyclone Spin's beads are down for the next couple of minutes. If we see some ganks start to work their way over there, this Oleron has to be worried. We've already highlighted on the desk. Erlang Shen has a good matchup over there, and now Erlang Shen's got a level lead. Was down 2, now up 1.
Yeah, Sino, the brilliant turnaround so far here. Gonna move back and lock down his speed buff. So Wolfie out of the mid lane, hasn't fallen just yet. And though what we've seen, Mifflin, in the last 2 games, specifically from Wolfie's build, is usually this Divine Ruin first, or 1 item out of that penetration tree, and then into something a little bit more defensive. It was, I believe, Spirit Robe in our last game, or something of the like out of that. Sino now being looked at, though. Might have to return to that point. Big Man Tings will get the kill onto the Obey Alliance jungler. Adapting low. Ducky slams on down to finish up the kill here. Still on the chase, looking for big man Tings, retreating out of the mid lane. Dazzling offensive, unable to get the stun as Wolfie will heal himself up, maybe walk away. Able to connect with the one this time around. The double knockup from Ducky. That's
Nice
huge.
kill.
And into the ultimate from Inbound, who gets the kill onto Aurora. Obey Alliance turn around that fight.
Man, Obey, pick a fight in the enemy jungle, immediately trade out their jungler. Sino falls down absolutely for free, but Wolfie connects his ultimate onto Adapting. He was looking for BMT, wasn't quite able to find him, and it just separates that team fight enough for Ducky to come in and make a huge play just like this.
Wow, what a turnaround. Benji has the dash shortly. And that's enough for him to escape the clutches of Ducky and Inbound. Inbound continues to impress on the Ymir here, affecting all 4 of the kills. Wolfie is in that column as well. And again, sort of back to that point, now for Wolfie out of the mid lane, this build is something he's kind of grown fond of. Something, you know, Divine Ruin early, finish off those boots, and then something a little bit more defensive to follow up. And, you know, Ra is definitely something where that Jade Helm tree can find some value.
Yeah, he really likes it for the survivability that it adds as well. And when you've got gods like Thor, like Hercules constantly looking to dive you in the backline, getting that additional defense is going to be hugely impactful, especially considering the playstyle that Wolfie looks for on this Ra. He doesn't need to be that one-man paragon of a carry. He needs to just follow up damage. He's constantly looking to follow up on what Sino's doing, or if he's fighting around Inbound on this Ymir. He's never playing as a solo agent, so he doesn't necessarily have to go fully towards that glass cannon build. I like this build path for the Ra just because of how it's going to allow him to help out the rest of his team. It's a much more team-oriented build than you'd expect to see from the majority of mid-lane mages.
Now Ducky has started to pull a little bit ahead here in the solo lane. Benji eats 5 or 6 tower shots there. Ducky had already used his stun, so no follow-up attempt onto Benji. Likely into the Lotus Crown it is for Wolfie there. A little extra prots for his teammates when they stand in that heal. Lasts for a few seconds there as well, so not only defensive, but a little extra utility out of the mid lane. It's been a popular route, if not the route that Wolfie has taken here. Big man Tings out of the mid lane has found a good crushing wave or 2 up to this point, and Hebo has done well, I think, in some self-peel. Is going to have to do so here. It's going to knock up Sino. Crushing wave nearly gets the one-shot. Up-down from Adapting does not connect. Oh, and the big heal from Sino keeps him alive. But exactly on cue, big man Tings is able to disengage the fight.
But Sino gets a ton of value there. He forces Adapting into his ultimate, BMT forced into his ultimate as well. You trade out your Blink and your own 9 turns Blessing, but it sets up for the rest of your team. If the first engagement doesn't work, the next one should. Obey's got a pretty nice advantage coming into this next team fight. They should be looking to push it absolutely. Either find the pressure onto the Cyclone Spin or move into the Gold Fury. They've got a ton of options, especially considering Ducky's already rotated out.
Right, so much of game number 1, if you really think back to it, shifted for Radiance once Cyclone Spin was able to kind of fully get involved in some of those fights. Granted, most of them were on the base defense, so he's going to be involved whether he likes it or not. But 2-0-0, 1 level ahead of Wowie. Maybe now's the time. Gold Fury, that's the double pull from Aurora, but there's no follow-up from the rest of the team. Obey Alliance have finished off the Fury this time around. First of the game, Cyclone Spin uses a Sanctified Field as Ducky will take to the skies to stun on the back, and Wowie limping away from this engagement. Radiance have done their job, at least for now.
BMT?
Ducky tries to find the kill onto BMT and gets it from range. Down goes to Hebo, but Cyclone Spin trades out 1. It's Obey Alliance still searching for just a little bit more, but you've searched in the wrong place. Cyclone Spin doubles its kill total with a double here around the Fury. Sino gets collapsed upon. 9 turns Blessing won't do it. Cyclone Spin with a
They're
triple.
not done.
Adapting has his ult. Stun down onto Wolfie, but he's gone too far here. Wolfie turns 1 back.
That was a nice turnaround from Obey there, but again, they look for this elongated engagement. They're diving constantly into Radiance's backline, but they're not diving the right person. You can't allow this Oleron to free cast. He's the highest level player on Radiance's team. He's got the most itemization. He's got the Ring of Akate and the Telkine's Ring. This dude is an absolute chainsaw. He can't be left alone. Someone has to deal damage to him. Someone has to force him to use the Sanctified Field defensively, or at least burn out some of those relics. I mean, Cyclone goes through the entire team fight and maintains his beads cooldown, and it wasn't even forced into using the Aegis. That was down before the fight as well. Someone has to address this Oleron.
Yeah, especially when Cyclone Spin isn't even necessarily going to be using those ultimates for massive team. I mean, he's sometimes just using the ultimates on himself to peel out whoever it is from Obey that's jumping on top of him. I mean, if that's the minimum amount of value that you're getting, Cyclone Spin will at least be happy with that. So it's something Obey, I think, have to consider here moving forward. Still has the beads, and that was without an Aegis as well. A triple kill around the Fury for Cyclone Spin. Highest net worth in the game. At least 1.3 thousand, of course, to be expected here. Opted for the Hecate, the Ring of Hecate early on here. We wondered if maybe he was so far ahead in game 1, they didn't need to quite box out as much, but Wowie's always going to be tough to go one-on-one with here. Ducky did find some value there, though, Mifflin. If you kind of rewind the clocks, you know, Benji came in, looked for the dazzling offensive. Ducky was kind of able to get that fadeaway kill that maybe kept Obey in that fight a little longer.
He was, and Ducky rotates into that team fight so early on because instead of electing to pick up the teleport, he goes for the beads, or the blink rather, in that first relic slot. So he has to rotate out early, which telegraphs when Obey is going to be looking for engagements, which allows Radiance to reposition a little bit around these team fights. They know exactly what Obey are looking for, but the engagement continues. Obey is not that far down, only about 2,000 gold separating these two teams. Radiance can't feel too comfortable just yet with the lead that they have.
Yeah, I think the only comfort is with Cyclone Spin here at 5-0. Everywhere else, you're a little worried. It's a 3-level lead for Cyclone Spin, which is why I'm surprised that, although it was, you know, only 2-0 on Cyclone before that Fury fight, but I think now maybe overstaying. Woo! He's not going to get into the ultimate. A couple damages combined there onto adapting, and down he goes. Here's the self-heal from the Sanctified Fields. Cyclone Spin's going to walk right back at Wowie. He uses the Aegis, dashes away here. Aurora is now here to help out his long laner. 3 members, now 4 from Obey, collapsing in on Cyclone Spin. Aurora eats the Heart Bomb this time. Cyclone Spin being looked at by inbound. Ducky collapses as well. That's one dead Olaron, and Sino is able to pick up the kill.
They want to continue chasing. The chase is still going on. Ducky blinks in to try and find the cat stun. Doesn't quite connect it himself. Did you see how Obey decided to play around that Sanctified Field? We saw Sino immediately engage. Right. Sanctified Field comes down. He holds down his S key. He waits for it to go away. Wowie hides behind his own minion wave instead of looking for continuous damage. They don't care that Radiance is going to have a little bit more time to rotate in because they know that the rest of Obey is on their heels as well. They wait for that engagement to really swing in their favor. Sanctified Field goes down. Beads go down. Then they look for the engagement.
Brilliant from Aurora, the double pull, double push into the wall. BMT falls nonetheless, though. You've gotten 2 now, as adapting with the double will finally capitalize on Aurora's nice setup there. Wowie is doing his best to kite away from things here, but adapting will have none of it. A triple kill, another triple for Radiance, as adapting has now turned his game around. He was 1, 4, and 5 before that fight. Now evens things up.
Yeah, Obey, a little bit of a questionable play to stick around on that tier 2 tower. They were a little bit low. Their ultimates were used up. Sino tries to engage in the backline, but the peel was too strong. Ducky immediately leaves once he identifies that it's a lost fight and is able to strip away that tier 1 mid tower from Radiance, which is going to open up the tier 2 just a little bit. And we're looking, again, 20 minutes in the game, 2,000 gold separating these teams, completely even matchup. Wolfie's been allowed to free cast for the most part, but this could be the difference maker. Look at that damage output from Olaron, burning away this Fire Giant so quickly. Wolfie spots it out.
Yeah, and you don't have Wowie for the next 10 or so seconds. This is an advantageous fight for Radiance. No chance for Obey to move their way in. What a call from Radiance, 20 minutes in. Take away the FG. And Benji's going to be able to get himself out alive. Brilliant play there from Radiance to sense the small opening and snag that big objective for themselves, especially with a lot of the towers still on the map. The gold lead had been somewhat even up to that point, hovering right around 1,000 plus or minus. Now the largest spike so far in this game. And Myth, there are 4 towers still for the taking. This is where Radiance can really start to pull away.
Yeah, 4 towers and a gold Fury unless Obey decide to try and strip it away, but it's going to be dangerous. The ranged engage from Radiance is so strong. Thor with that ultimate can turn it around. Now they're deep in the jungle. They have to escape out of here and make it out alive. If they do get picked at all, every single one of those 4 towers is going to go down for free. Luckily for Obey, they are able to slip away, sneak that gold Fury in the night. but now Radiance has to play that siege potential, not only with a gold lead, but also with Fire Giant. And it's good. Benji with Dazzling Offensive is going to engage the fight. If anyone gets too far, Adapting can chase them down. Cyclone Spin can just drop it a Sanctified Field around a Phoenix once they get into it, not only boosting his own attack speed so he can burn away these Phoenixes instantly, but also just create a no-play zone where Obey is going to have to respect that time until it goes away. There's so much here that Radiance has to work through, and I doubt we see them really go for Phoenix anytime soon. There's just so much free gold on the map. Obey's got a little bit of time to work with, but this gold deficit is going to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, despite being able to get out alive, you're likely not going to slow down Radiance for all that much longer. Benji's making his way over to Sino. I wonder if he's feeling he has the ability to 1v1 Zerlong Shen, and does, but Sino with the escapability will keep himself alive there. So Benji is just going to get this right-hand side of the map pushing in. It's been a tough day for Sino. I mean, he's had a rough one on the Arachne, a much better game there in game 2, but the Erlong Shen, despite some early pressure here, Mifflin, 2, 4, and 5 is definitely not what Obey Alliance have been hoping for out of the jungle.
And it's interesting because he decides to go a little bit more towards a damage route than we normally see from Sino. As you pointed out earlier, he likes to go a little bit more utility, a little bit more defense with the engage. Now all damage in the build.
Inbound gets knocked up and knocked to the side there. Stay alive, plenty tanky enough on the Amir, has the Bulwark of Hope as well, a little extra shielding on the back end of engagements. Ducky around the backside, he'll blink through, knock up, knock to the side on Cyclone Spin, Fields of Love. That one's good from Wowie here. Wolfie has found the delete key onto Aurora. Ducky left alone with 3 members of Radiance looking at him, but he's bought so much time. The Somersault Cloud, which way does he go? Does he re-engage? Not just yet. It's a knock-up on inbound instead. Adapting elsewhere in the engagement. Stun wall down. Ducky last alive. He's found a big knock-up though. Obey Alliance still a chance to fight back in, but Crushing Wave sets up Adapting for the dunk. And down goes Ducky. It's a 2-for-1 trade, and Radiance walking their way to the mid lane.
With Sanctified Field still available to them as well. No ultimates from Obey. I mean, in that last engagement, Sino straight up misses 9 turns Blessing, but they're still able to find the kill onto Aurora in the back line, and they're going to lose out on their Phoenix just about for free here. Once Obey finds that initial pick and they trade out their lives, Ducky's a little bit too deep to escape. Inbound's no longer available either. Sino gets dropped to about 10% health, so he has to disengage himself. Obey could have just walked away. They didn't have to trade out any of their lives after that initial pick onto Aurora, and they could have regrouped on that Phoenix and tried to force Radiance into taking another true, now this time, 4-on-5 siege. But instead, they decided to get a little bit overzealous. They overstayed their welcome inside their own Tier 2 tower, and Radiance exploits it perfectly. Takes some lives, takes the tower and the Phoenix, Pyromancer on the tail end as well. This gold lead is ballooned out of control, 9,000, nearly 10 in favor of Radiance.
Took the words right out of my mouth there, Mifflin. That was the threat that the 20-minute Fire Giant had brought to the table. That's exactly what Radiance are able to take advantage of. And now you have to look already at 24 minutes into contesting your second Fire Giant, but you're so far behind in this game. Obey have to be very, very careful, though I suppose the small bit of maybe an advantage that Obey have is that Searing Pain from Wolfie. This Raw has the ability to out-confirm some of the damage that Radiance are bringing to the table, depending on what it is they want to use to lock it down. A Crushing Wave could be used, but that's, a tough price to pay just to lock down an objective, considering BMT sometimes needs it to disengage. So, I imagine maybe Myth Obey Alliance hangs close by this Fire Giant, maybe even just for the attempt to steal.
Yeah, with just the mid Phoenix going down as well, they can keep that mid wave pushed up pretty easily as they try and put a little bit of presence around this Fire Giant, and it seems like it's going to be more than a little.
Yeah, they want to fight now. Off to the side is Wolfie on his ultimate. That one does not connect for any damage really at all. Benji, dazzling offensive, will connect for a stun. Down goes Ducky though. Wow, he's gotten a kill as well. BMT is trying to move his way backwards, and he's able to do so. A 2-for-2 trade as we stand. Obey Alliance step up to the plate. We're able to keep things even, at least as far as kills go, around this Fire Giant. BMT looking for a little bit extra. It's a 3 versus 3 around the FG.
But Wowie on this Cupid has the ability to heal, as does Ra. Obey can stick around for a lot longer than the entirety of Radiance, so they're going to have to go ahead and back up to base. Obey do a good job of buying a little bit of time. A 2-for-2 trade, 10,000 gold down on a Fire Giant at 25 minutes is immaculate. That's the best that you could hope for in Obey in that engagement, and it's brought to them by the fact that Adapting tries to dunk into the backline to peel out for Cyclone Spin, who is forced to move into Obey's side of the jungle once he drops the Sanctified Field, and immediately, once the fight is split up, Cyno tears through that front line, that pseudo front line that is Olaran and Thor. It's just the positioning there was a little bit iffy. Aurora for Radiance tries to back up a little bit and peel out for BMT. He does keep him alive, but trading out your Olaran, who is the sole source of damage on the objectives, just about for Radiance, not really the best trade.
Yeah, Cyclone Spin had to use everything to stay alive there and was unable to do so. To check back in with Wolfie Mifflin, it's been the one defensive item plus a lot of power and penetration throughout the last couple of games here. It's another Contagion pickup, maybe into an E-Staff later on. So as of right now, a little extra, utility damage-wise before that E-Staff is finished off, but it's really Divine Ruin and Soul Reaver, and then you've got a Lotus Crown and a Contagion as well, so maybe truly hybrid coming out of the mid lane.
It's a lot of physical defense that he's going for as well. Wolfie has been playing so far back in these engagements that he doesn't really have to worry about BMT or Cyclone Spin being the ones hitting him. If he's worried about the dive, he's built the right way, but he's sacrificed so much damage. He's going to need that E-Staff sooner than later for that additional penetration if he wants to get involved in these fights in a big way. I mean, the Searing Pain right now being one of the hardest hitting abilities on the side of Obey, truthfully, isn't even hitting that hard with this build that he's decided to go for.
Yeah, Roar just tickled down by a little bit of damage there from Wolfie. Lotus Crown does provide a little bit of extra magical power as well, so something to be mindful of. 30 on that item. So not a complete loss there. Extra utility, of course, as well. Lots of Raz build Lotus Crowns. Not necessarily just the Wolfie special here. But Radiance definitely the ones playing a bit further forward. Though it's tough to play forward into a Ymir. A good wall and a stun, and suddenly you're separated and killed off from the rest of your team. Watch out for Ducky, lurking around the left-hand side. In around to the back, the Sun Wukong will go. Inbound has separated the fight, Adapting, trying to take to the sky, able to do so. Searing Pain from Wolfie, not in time. Anvil of Dawn, it's a double dunk from Adapting here. Double Aegis from the carries of Obey.
Huge play.
Radiance on the re-engage from Adapting, able to grab a kill. Aurora is stunned down. Sanctified Field just catches the end of inbound. Benji right back through onto the silence, but the pin from Cyno slows him down. There's the pull, there's the push, there's the kill. BMT makes it 2 for Radiance.
Man, Radiance actually won that engagement multiple times. Aurora pulls inbound 3 separate times before the fight starts off, truthfully, but there's no follow-up on it. BMT was playing so far back, having to worry about the damage output from Cyno, having to worry about where Ducky is as he was pushing up mid. He could have come from behind at any point, so there really wasn't any follow-up until we see that difference maker ultimate from Adapting, finding the 2 hyper carries in the backline. Wolfie and Wowie trading out both their beads and Aegis just so they can have a chance at surviving there is absolutely huge. And now Radiance pulling the Fire Giant for themselves on all 5 members. Healthy as well. They don't even have to go back to base. It's time to siege.
Look at this from Radiance. They're just walking in onto the Phoenix. Ducky has lost half of his HP. It's Aurora tanking up the Phoenix right now. Shifts over to Benji for a little extra damage on the back end. Cyclone Spin walks forward. Phoenix melting quickly. Mid lane Phoenix is respawned. Adapting. He wants to go now. But down to where is the question. In behind as the right side Phoenix will fall, and that's all Radiance were here for.
Well, that's all they really needed. Adapting goes up in the air there. It seemed like for a second he was considering trying to look at Cyno in the backline, thinks better of it, and decides just to use it for the threat, force Obey to peel off of their own Phoenix, D-group a little bit, spread out, making it that much harder to defend it. And now Radiant's going to go back, clear out the jungle, strip away whatever they can, spend the gold that they got from taking away the Phoenix and the Fire Giant as well. And then I imagine we see them group up on that left side and try and take that oh-so-important duo lane Phoenix.
BMT has a cool 3.6k to spend up here. And I'll just take a complete Kronos pendant, please, is what Big Man Ting says. This Hippo has reached the point, Mifflin. All that power, all that penetration online, 30 minutes into this game. You have to play defensively, but that's because, as we take a quick pause before we get back into game, you might only need that one opportunity to fully blow up one of the carries on Obey.
Look, it's been a running meme. Every single time we see a Hebo, we like to say he's the god of triple ultimates, and it's never rung more true than it does right now with that build. If he finds a water spout and a water cannon onto just about anyone that isn't inbound or Ducky on the side of Obey, it should instantly result in a kill. But look at this grouping. Obey doesn't want them in the Phoenix.
Benji, half HP. Obey looking for the fight. It's a dazzling offensive forced out of the Radiant solo laner. Aurora pulls and pushes Ducky into the backline, adapting. Another big dunk and another big stun onto Obey's backline. Is the damage there, though? It sure is. Aurora's gotten a kill, but Ducky has stayed alive long enough to get a kill. Cyclone Spin held on to the Sanctified Field that whole time. Suddenly it's Ducky and Wolfie against the world. A double kill for the Sun Wukong. And now it's a 2 versus 2. Aurora looking for more, but it looks like this one might fizzle out. What a gritty fight from Obey to stay alive.
Man, Obey takes that fight perfectly. Immediately they catch out Benji trying to walk throughout the jungle, do a ton of damage to him. Then now Obey have done a great job of keeping their base alive. Now it's only Cyclone Spin continuing the push, so it's going to be a 1v1. Wolfie versus Cyclone on that left side Phoenix if he decides to stick around, while Aurora's going to have to dedicate the entirety of his time to try and separate Ducky and make sure that he can't get back to base. I mean, it's a wet noodle fight. Ducky shouldn't die here, but there's so much disruption factor that maybe someone will be able to rotate in. Ducky, stop using the bird, bud! Stop it! Go somewhere else! Knock him up with the board! He's pulled you out of it 3 times!
Here we go, Aurora chasing down Ducky. I'm trying to build up into this. I can't do it seriously. The Oni Fury is taken down. There you go, the bull to run away. Oh, Aurora hits another one, and now Ducky seriously has no mana. Luckily, Wolfie is respawning here on the right-hand side, so Aurora is going to have to turn tail at some point, unless this one wants to turn into a bait. There is an Excavate. If Aurora thinks he can maybe do a little bit more damage. And that was just to buy some time, and a Fury is locked down for Radiance in the meantime. So smart plays maybe from Aurora. Now has the ability to step forward and help out the rest of his team, maybe set up some vision before the Fire Giant respawns in a minute and a half.
What an absolute bully Aurora is, chasing him for a full minute and a half. That's toxic, man. Ducky does make it out of there alive with the help of Wolfie. Big Dad Wolfie has to come in and save young man Ducky from that scary situation. But now, they've done a good job, Obey that is, of keeping their base unbroken. The mid and left side Phoenix still up. But yeah, that might be it.
That's a huge knock-up on Asano, who stays alive. The 3-man stun from inbound keeps his jungler alive. The support's getting it done here. Ducky has to take to the sky. Up to the somersault cloud he goes, and he'll leap right on back to safety. But you've gotten Sino out of the engagement. You've gotten inbound. You've gotten Ducky away from things. Unfortunately, no FG to take, but Oni fire minions on the right-hand side. Oni minions pushing down the mid lane. Radiance feel that this is a great opportunity, and it is. Inbound and knocked right back into the awaiting arms.
Nice
Aurora, the only one stunned here. Sino pins down on a Cyclone Spin, but beads and Aegis will keep him alive. Around the side, 9 turns Blessing. No good, but here comes Ducky right down Main Street. It's a Sanctified Fields that gets used. In Radiance, risky fight there will stay alive.
They do a lot to pull away Obey's attention. That right side Phoenix is spawning. If no one gets there quickly, those fireman waves might be enough to take it down themselves. Obey getting very risky, stepping up that far into the Fire Giant pit, and Radiance almost optimized on it themselves. Get a little bit overzealous, feeling a little bit too confident in their ability to fight. Even though they had already traded out 3 of their ultimates, Radiance decided to move into that mid Phoenix to even try their hand at sieging away there, but Obey's defense is incredibly strong. Despite Sino, again, straight up missing 9 turns Blessing.
Mifflin, this has been so much fun. I almost don't want this to end, but I'm sure if you're a Radiance fan or an Obey fan, you just want your team to edge this one out. How close have things been here? Now 35 minutes into game number 3. Enhanced Fire Giant from Radiance. Down to 10% HP here, adapting just wide on the stun. Inbound walked in, unable to lock it down. Ducky close by. Obey Alliance! They take away the FG here. Ducky is unable to do it, but it's Wolfie instead. The Searing Pain, the one we were concerned about. The ultimate from the backline steals away the FG for Obey, and now Radiance are left running.
Left in a 1-for-none situation. Obey take away the Fire Giant on all 5 members. Sino maintains his own ultimate, so there's a lot of engage potential here. A lot of towers standing between Obey and the base of Radiance. They might decide and try and strip away this mid-Phoenix while they still have the numbers advantage. Benji dead for the next 38 seconds. Siege potential is there. Sustain, Fire Giant. Obey's got it all. Backline dive. They just have to make sure that BMT can have a good defense. Make sure that Cyclone Spin doesn't get a lot of value out of this Sanctified Field.
Cyclone Spin was the saving grace in game number 1. Aurora taken down by Wolfie. Obey, they're knocking on the door of the Titan room, but they want to play this one cautiously. There are still 3 towers standing, so the Titan will be a little extra tanky here. Let's make our way over to the left-hand side, take down this tower, siege in on the Phoenix. There's no Benji for 5, but no Aurora for 45. so they might not even need minions.
Use that healing wisely. Ra drops the Solar Blessing, keeping everyone topped off. They can move in towards this left side Phoenix. It's the right call to make. But again, those threats are still there. BMT and Cyclone Spin. Keep an eye on their ultimate cooldowns, because that's going to be the determining factor for Radiance's defense here. Obey's in first, diving the back.
Whoa, Ducky! He's found 3. Smart use of the ultimate to stay alive here. Searing Pain from Wolfie. He's going to find a little bit of damage here. Big Man Ting, Cyclone Spin, half HP. Phoenix, 0 HP. Now the left and mid of the Radiance base broken open. Mifflin, it seems like we've been here before. And now Radiance, this game has been turned on its head, as Obey Alliance have kept themselves in it once more, taken the Fire Giant away. That's what, the second FG steal we've seen in this set so far. There's one in game 1. And now Wolfie gets it done here as well. Massive plays from Obey. Sometimes that's what you need, somebody to step up in a big moment to keep you alive in the game.
And it was absolutely Wolfie this time around. He's still going undying 36 minutes into the game, largely brought, in fact, to the defensive abilities elected to go for. Additional health from the Ethereal Staff also going to help him out a lot. And now Obey have a lot of time to work with. 1.5 minutes for this enhanced Fire Giant to stay on as a buff. They can move themselves through this right-hand side, get down that tier 1 tower, that tier 2. It seems like Radiance, though, taking a play out of Obey's book, grouping up as 5 in the enemy jungle, just waiting to see if they can catch anyone meandering about. If Ducky steps up even too far, a little bit of CC might put him down.
Cyclone Spin might be the bait here. Double ping, but it was only onto where Cyclone was. I haven't seen any pings from Obey onto where Radiance were standing immediately. Now some ringing out, so I like the idea from Radiance. That is a risky play, but if you're able to get the enemy team to bite, you're definitely in a good spot. Every active in the game will be available except Ducky's Blink and BMT's Beads out of the mid lane, so about as full strength as it gets, especially for Cyclone Spin, trying to stay alive in the back line. Has picked up a Rod of Tahuti now on this Oleron. Miff, I mean, the auto attacks are going to be swinging big, and now it's going to get even worse if he's left unchecked.
Obey has so much time to work with here, and the left side Phoenix getting pushed down again by the Fireman waves. They can play it slow, wait for the Sanctified Field to go down and disengage for a war.
Fields of Love is a roar, taken low, dashes away, inbound, uses his ultimate in exchange. 3 Phoenixes down and a roar cleaned up by Sano on the back line. Benji, he's walled in here. Obey, they smell blood in the water. Heart Bomb detonates, 3 of Radiance left alive. Big Man Tings has to make his way back into the fountain. This is it for Obey. They can take down one of the top 4 teams here. Radiance have lost 1 set this phase, and Obey is knocking on the door of making it 2, 5 members strong. Into the Titan room they go. Fire Giant buff just falls off. They just need to focus themselves onto the Titan, adapting up to the sky. It's not going to be enough. The Sanctified Fields only slows them down. Obey Alliance in 3 games take the win.
This is not the Obey that we're used to seeing. This is not the Obey that we say at the end of every set, well, they lost, but they're getting better. They're improving marginally every single week. This is Obey who came in not only with their own individualistic plan, this new meta that they're establishing for themselves with the Ra and the Erlang Shen, but they're playing all new drafts every single game. All 3 games this set bring a whole new identity, and it works out against Radiance, some of the best who have ever done it.
Mifflin, you knew it too. You're the one who voted Obey going into this matchup. Radiance did not make it easy on them, but Obey Alliance, they come up big here. 3 games. It's a lengthy one to welcome back the SPL after a bye week, but what a way to start things off. That's only halfway it for our day. We're going to head it to a quick break, and when we come back, the desk will break down this set.
Well, pinch yourself. I promise you are not dreaming. Obey Alliance find the win here over Radiance. 2-1 towards the end of this set. And what an impressive set it was. Mifflin said it towards the end of the cast. We saw 3 different looks from Obey, and I think all 3 of those looks are pretty strong. No longer can you overlook this roster. They're taking games off the best of the best. I still have Aggro here with me on the desk, and we could talk a little bit here about how this 3rd game happened, because I honestly think this 3rd game was Obey's weakest game of the set. But even still, despite that struggle performance, they were able to find the win here. How'd they overcome Radiance?
Once again, Obey just scraps together a win based on some mistakes by Radiance and making opportunities for themselves. A couple of great initiations by Obey, and counter initiations in particular by Inbound on this Ymir. He was fantastic on stopping a lot of these fights from really running over their backline. Wolfie was able to stay safe. Ducky was a nightmare in the backline for Radiance to deal with. And Radiance just could never put together a cohesive team fight despite a lot of really good individual plays by a lot of their players. Adapting, hitting a two-man dunk on both of the backliners, getting both their beads Aegis, and surviving should be game-winning just about every time. But Obey is difficult to siege against. They go with a psychotic ambush by Radiance's purple buff, an ambush where neither of their carries have relics, an ambush that literally should have lost them the game if Radiance were ready for it. But Radiance just weren't. They weren't prepared, and it really caught them off guard, and that really stalled the game out to allow Obey to get back to a point where they could have won. Because I think if Radiance get to Phoenixes on that siege, they almost certainly win the game right there. But Obey does enough to stop them in their tracks and give themselves a chance, and then they make the plays to win it.
They improve now to 3-8, right there alongside Renegades, within reaching distance of PK, that coveted 5th place spot, right outside those top 4 teams we always talk about. And Radiance now, we were talking about how they only had 1 loss coming into this, the 7-1, maybe right there with SSG, but now we're wondering, are they rusty coming in? You know, is that time off hurting them where they weren't playing, or is Obey just this much better? Perhaps we'll get our chance to get some clarity on that on Sunday when Radiance play again, but this has got to be a wake-up call or something like that for Radiance. I don't know that there was a point in this set, except for maybe the first half of Game 3, where they were really just outplaying Obey here. Obey played very, very well throughout all 3 games.
Agreed. Look, there's no doubt that Radiance was rusty. You can't look at this set and say this was the best Smite Radiance has played this year. But that shouldn't do anything to take away from what Obey did. Obey earned this victory 100%. They played well enough to win. That shouldn't be the narrative. But I do expect to see Radiance improve from what we saw today, regardless of how well Obey played.
I would think so, too. They're not normally as disjointed as what we saw here today, so some room for Radiance to perhaps bounce back and Obey now, a team that you gotta fear. Ducky, one of the ones that's leading the charge, is standing by right now with the interview.
Yeah, quite literally on the Sun Wukong. Ducky first through the door in a lot of the engagements. First off, Ducky, congratulations to you guys. What a blast that set was to watch and cast for Mifflin and I. First off, I want to rewind to game number 1. We'll get to the good stuff in a minute, but it's a long one. It's back and forth. We're closing in on nearly an hour. Had the chance to maybe win it there. What are kind of communications like? Do you think your team has grown communication-wise in tense games like that come down to the wire late on?
I don't want to talk about game 1. I think we should all forget about that one. That
Fair
was
enough.
a bit of a clan fiesta.
All right, Clan Fiesta,
learn...
look. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. We need to learn how to siege Titan and Phoenixes, because, you know, it looked like a rough one after that game 1, but I think we picked it up the next few ones.
You did, and we are now focusing exclusively on the good and great that we saw from you guys throughout the rest of this set. Specifically, I want to start with you. The Sun Wukong pick obviously worked for you throughout this set, able to disengage if Aurora's chasing you across the map, or engage, find big 3-man knockups in team fights. Where do you pin this Sun Wukong as far as tier lists go? Amaterasu was a popular pick for Benji here today, but you were happy to take that matchup.
I just wanted to dive with Sino, so that was our main priority. So I was just blinking in, going full damage most games. Third game, I went Bulwarks, and then we get one shot by Hebo. But the majority of the fights, I was just blinking in, getting my damage off, ulting, and then going again, and then probably dying. But I think it worked out. I mean, clearly we won, so...
That's right. It worked out. You guys got the win. And really one big takeaway I think that the desk mentioned, and I agree with, there's sort of a variety of composition looks for you guys here today. Very Obey-esque in the final game, mixed things up in Game 1 and Game 2. Do you think this team has sort of grown from early on, even in Phase 1, where you were just sort of trying out one thing that wasn't working? Do you guys feel comfortable maybe with a little bit of everything nowadays?
I think we were more trying to play meta picks instead of playing what we're comfortable on. So, for example, Bobby on Ymir, he's kind of popping off, not gonna lie.
He was.
Yeah, so I think if we pick more comfort picks, that's more our style, and I think we play around that better.
That's right. Well, hey, Ducky, this one, again, absolute blast to watch. Congratulations to you guys. A big win over a top 4 team for you. We'll see you back in action on Sunday against the United. So all you Obey fans at home, keep your eyes peeled for that one. Get some rest, guys. It was a big game and a big win for you. But everyone else at home, stick around. We got another half of the day coming up right after this break.
Bye, guys.